Game begin.
Tested in weeks.
Yeah, it's been 4 weeks since Michael J. and Lanny Huang, the inaugural.
This shit should be on the podcast so that I can rant back at you.
Yeah, it is. I hit the record button already.
Okay. Yeah, so you could say that again. It's been 4 weeks, whatever.
It's been 4 weeks since the inaugural lead co-hosts of the Spike Colony podcasts. My friend, he's got that James Dean daydream look in his eyes, Michael J. Flores.
I do.
And your regular co-host, Lanny Huang.
I told you, I said, hey, let's record a bunch of episodes. I'm going to go for a few weeks. I warned you.
I'm only available.
No, it'll be fine.
We can't. You work around my schedule is how it works. I can't work around your schedule. Like you work around, as the CEO of the Spike Colony podcast, like I decide when we work.
Well, and apparently that doesn't involve me for a few weeks, but now I'm back.
Yeah. I mean,
dear listeners, I wanted to play goblins. I really wanted to play goblins. I said, I don't think I can play Oathpauloosh very well. The response that I got was, I don't want to do another episode on goblins. So then the result was me complaining about Oathpauloosh all morning, yada, 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 optimal finish. But like,
this is like a lesson in, this isn't like, Michael J somehow forgot the cardinal rule of Magic the Gathering tournaments is that you always bring some almonds. Like, if Covert Go Blue isn't getting you the almonds, you have to bring your own almonds.
I was so hangry. But whatever, yada, 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 optimal finish, plot armor, everything you ever say. I mean, beginning of the day, all I did was complain to the team. Back half of the day, no one could beat me. So
yeah, well, there you go. It was a 3-2-1 finish for top 4 in a 16-person tournament. Yep, big week in pre-modern. Since last week, the last 2 weeks, we took a week off. The Spanish Nationals has concluded, and the winner is none other than Red Deck Wins, taking down the trophy. So congrats to them. I should probably have their name pulled up so that I can congratulate them thoroughly.
Is there I haven't even looked at these lists.
I can pull the list up for you, but
just text me the list and I'll pretend that I perused them ahead of time.
Yeah,
this was like 50% of all the episodes of Top Level Podcast that like Patrick would just like ship me lists in the middle of the podcast, and I'd be like, yeah, I understand how this deck works.
Oh yeah, I mean, I could.
You would have never guessed though.
No, I guessed all the time.
You guessed.
I as a listener of Top Level Podcast, I was like hearing you react live to these deck lists, and I'm like, yeah, this guy has no clue what's going on in the format, does he? he's just raw dogging this.
It ended up being a pretty good podcast.
Yeah, I mean, we all had a good time. Here we go. Javier Campo. So congrats to Javier. This is just freaking stock. There are.
You gonna send this to me?
There are two curse scrolls, or there's 2 volcanic hammers, an extra curse scroll, and an extra vortex in here. So this is just like bobbleless 20 land burn, but the rest is.
You are just a 4 sulfuric vortex man, aren't you?
I love sulfuric vortex. I just like get down with my opponent not gaining life and taking 2 damage a turn. Like the expectation on vortex is like 6 damage, right?
I don't know, man.
Isn't that a ball lightning? I mean, maybe it's like 4.5 damage because they'll be dead, or like it'll be like 3 damage.
Depends. If they're the rock, it's 20 damage.
Yeah.
If they're land still, it's negative 20 damage.
I mean, I explained this with Aaron, but I was like, you play the vortex, and then you kill all your opponent's creatures, and then the vortex kills your opponent, and you're in great shape.
It's weird, With Red Deck winning, why don't I just play Red Deck in Modern this week? Why don't I just do that? Yeah. Why don't I sign up for a Modern RCQ and play it?
We'll detour through Modern right now.
Javier Campo.
Yeah, we'll detour through Modern. So I played 10 matches of Andrea Mingucci's Miracle Gro in Modern deck using the new card Questing Druid, which is or Questing
this
Dryad.
Card?
Oh my god!
This card?
Do you have 4? Can I borrow? I just need that and some like blue cards, and then I own the deck. Anyways,
I own the whole deck actually, except for the other ones of that and Ragavan. But I mean, that's easy.
oh, I've got Ragavan, so we
All you need is cash
once
for that.
once more I have the missing piece, which is the artifact that taps for mana, Ragavan Nimble Pilfer. So you play the burn deck, and I'll play Ragavan Miracle Gro, which is like another copium deck in Modern. Like Andre,
Are you going to come to the RCQ on Saturday in Hoboken? Rock and roll.
Hoboken? How are you? You need a ride then again. Oh, I guess you can take the path to Hoboken.
One stop on the path.
Okay, interesting.
It's one stop.
Isn't Sip and Play having an RCQ
I
in Brooklyn?
signed up for the one in Hoboken because that's the one that came up on Spice Rack.
All right. So Modern is rancid, but there is a blue-red deck that casts a lot of spells and has questing Dryad or Druid. Whatever it is, it's an adventure. If you don't know what an adventure is, I'm not going to explain it to you. It's too complicated.
How much of a genius am I going to look like for never taking this card?
So front side is 1 in an R, and it's a impulse for 2. Like a impulse draw for 2, reckless impulse, instant, and then backside is Korean Dryad. So I was playing.
It's like exactly Korean Dryad.
It's literally the text of Korean
Dryad. They attached it to a card that is a cross format all star.
Yeah.
They attached 8 copies of in Standard and in Pioneer.
Yeah, they attached Korean Dryad to 2 mana draw 2, which, if you ask me, is pretty freaking sick. Anyways, I love this deck. This deck is so underpowered. It's awesome. It doesn't get to play Mox Diamond or Daze or Gush or Foil. Instead, it just has to pay mana for all its spells.
I think you're at a huge advantage because Dum-Dums don't have Eidolon of the Great Revel in their deck anymore.
You literally can't beat any configuration of the burn deck with this deck because all the creatures have 3 or less toughness.
I'm just gonna rock and roll.
Every single one of your creatures dies to a Searing Blaze. It's just like unbelievable.
Oh, what about a Searing Blood?
Most of the creatures die to a Searing Blood, although
Michael J.
I think
I'm gonna play like 14 total minutes in the Swiss. That's my goal.
I mean, if this deck is if this Miracle Gro deck in Modern is this popular, because the price of the Dryad has already spiked. Like, yeah, you have insane matchup versus that. Burn has a good matchup with it versus.
You already had it.
Burn versus has. Well, you're not going to sell it. You're going to lend it to me permanently. Anyways,
how many of my super expensive cards did I just lend?
I have. I got a present for you, so I'm actually going to hit you back for letting me permanently borrow a bunch of your cards.
Well, I mean, it's not permanent. Those are the only City of Traders I own.
Well, the cities you'll get back because I have gold bordered, but you're never getting the intuitions back. Like, I lost my job. I'm not going to be plus $600 for a little while. Like, my wife is
asking you to pay for them.
My wife is
at some point can I have my cards back?
No, you can't have them back until I buy my own. I still need to be plus $600 to
What if I need to play Replenish? I am the most decorated Replenish player.
You're not gonna play Replenish. You're too busy. You'll never play a deck. So, a little bit of insight into how the team works. We all hop on Discord, and we all just think like our own deck is like better than everyone else's. And everyone's like, you should just play what I want to play. And they're like, no, you should play what I want to play. And we all just like go back and forth. Oathpauloosh was the first time.
Or Goblins. I'm not.
You were mad about it.
Out there making decks.
Well, that's just because you've been off it for a while. I don't know what's going on with, formerly one of the deck designers of all time. Don't know what's going on with you. You're too busy, I guess. Too busy to put pen to paper. And you only get your reps in person play, so you're a little rusty.
Today I ran 6 miles, did about 80 diamonds, did a row. Probably just going to do archery and then run another 2 miles tonight before going to the Cavs game.
Yeah, none of these are.
Also, it's basketball season. I love Magic, but like 3 nights a week, I'm going to be. I literally just go to. I live 2 blocks from the Barclays Center. They conveniently made the season opener 2 minutes from my house. Like, I'm not going to go. Rand was like, "You missed movie club for basketball." I'm like, "Yes, I was at the season opener."
I mean, there you have it. Don't expect any new pre-modern technology from Michael J. soon.
Yeah, June, we'll come back in June just in time for LobsterCon.
Do you have like Same 75 Burn X2? Can you just like lend me Same 75 Burn and we can just like both play Burn in?
I have enough fetch lands, but you won't have good ones, I think.
I've got fetches and chalks.
I only have 5 Eidolons. I don't know.
I just won't play Eidolon.
I have
I'll play
some
Roiling
extra
Vortex.
Goblin Guides, but not an extra 4. I have definitely like Swift Spears. I can look at regular burn cards. Let me think. What dual lands do we need? Yeah, I definitely have extra Sacred Foundry. I gave land Sacred.
I've got Sacred Foundry. I've got Sacred Foundry and every red fetch. I'm gonna use Bloodstained Mires obviously because old border, like just Bloodstained Mire Wooded Foothills.
Well, empirically correct to play the red blue one and the black blue one. I literally won a match last year.
You mean the black red one? It's actually so.
Yeah.
So you
my
don't.
Opponent, like,
all right, I'm just gonna blow your mind here. Don't play.
I was Death Shadow.
So don't play black red one because your opponent's Dothy Voidwalker can play the black red land and go get a swamp from their deck.
Okay. When I start losing to Dothy Voidwalkers, maybe I'll listen to you. I know I'm going to sound like either an asshole or a boomer on this, but basically all the things I think about Burn are right. And all of the times when other people disagree with me, it just takes them a while before they figure out that they've been wrong.
There's no,
right?
there's just
like I'm just always right.
So there's no Burn.
The reason for that is because I think about it instead of just copying all these decks with 4 Skullcrack.
No, I mean there's just no Burn. There's no Burn mains anymore. Like. If I mean, I guess I'll have to ask. I'll have to ask because you're just terminally not online. I'm terminally online, right? So somewhere out there, there's an individual who's just mainlining modern Burn and hasn't stopped for like
there's like a lot
whatever.
of them, right? So
no, there's not. There's not.
There is. They have a whole Discord.
Name them. No. No Discords, Mike. You can't point to people.
They just talk to me.
No, Mike.
I don't know who they are.
No, just you always do this thing where you're obsessed with the people who have bad information, and you're like really into.
I look at all the deck lists, and they all have Skullcrack.
Mike,
their decks are bad.
Okay, let me talk.
Okay, fine.
Stop obsessing over people with bad information. Look for the people who have good information. There's no point. Like, there are limitless Magic the Gathering players who make poor decisions in their deck list, and they go and they play, they win their ICQ, like whatever. There's an unlimited supply of people who effectively, don't know what they're doing or don't know what they're doing adjacent. But that's not useful to you. Like, it's not useful to you to like scream into the void that Skullcrack is unplayable. Like, you actually have to find somebody who's doing the right things, or you just have to be that person. But there's just like no point. I mean, we've heard it a million times. Like you've been on the crusade. We're like, there.
Carl Serap, who's like multiple Pro Tour top 8 competitor, or Mengu are like out there playing
Mengu's
in leagues with these terrible decks.
Are they? I said Burn main. I said Burn main. Mengu doesn't play Burn.
He's played him in multiple freaking videos where he's playing in leagues.
But that's not playing Burn. That's not playing Burn. That's content, Mike.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, they're just playing these terrible versions, and you ask them why, and they're like, "That's just the version people play."
Yeah, that means
I play.
That means they're not a credible source. Like, I don't care if Finkel is playing a league of Burn. I'm like not gonna ask him.
Like Finkel's gonna play a league.
Yeah,
okay, right?
But that's what I'm saying.
Come on, Lanny.
Whatever. I'm honestly. What I'm trying to say is just like they don't have it on good information, right? This is like the fundamental problem is that you need to look for good information. You can't just be like, oh, well, there's only bad information out there. Like, you have to look for good information. So, like, basically, what I'm trying to say is that nobody, like, I recommend everybody go check out the most recent Humans of Magic, or not most recent, second most recent Humans of Magic interview episode, in which James talks to a friend of the podcast, Samuel H. Black. And one of the things that Sam effectively referenced or sub-referenced is information cascades. He was just saying, like, one of the things that you have to do when you're like innovating or coming up with decks is just assume that people probably missed something. Like look for information. Like, that they either all net deck to each other. They have no idea what they're doing. Like, you just have to assume that, right? And he was just like, in order to be a deck builder, you have to have hubris, because you have to believe that people are doing something wrong.
I've got the hubris.
Oh, I know you have the hubris.
I've got that part covered.
An addendum to that, I think, I don't know, I'm just kind of meandering at this point, but the addendum to that is that, like, there are sources of good information. Like, you can look for the individual, the person that just like only plays Burn and Modern, and like they're actually good at it, right? They top whatever there is to top around. Like, there's not really that much competitive Modern. Burn didn't really make a showing at the PT, but somebody is like grinding Burn and like working on these lists. They'll just be posting. They'll be like, hey, I tried trimming Lightning Helix. I tried cutting Skullcrack. Like, Roiling Vortex is good. Roiling Vortex is bad. Good. It's good. I mean, it's good right now because every deck pays 0 mana for their spells. I cast a freaking Mishra's Bauble into that thing last week.
You're a dum-dum.
Yeah, well, I was just like, my opponent played it, and I was like, oh, sweet, my deck does not have Fury, Solitude, or any Cascader, so I'm good. And I'm like, Mishra's Bauble, take 5, concede. I just hit the concede button so fast.
I beat this guy in the Swiss. He ended up making top 8. I don't play Sanctifier on back. And he's like, well, that would have just beaten me. And I'm like, dude, I had a Rolling Vortex in play against your Mishra's Bauble theme deck. Why do you feel like I needed Sanctifier back? What were you going to do with your Mishra's Bauble theme deck through the Rolling Vortex that was in play? Like, because as I recall, I easily defeated you.
Yeah, and Sanctifier
deck's good.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's definitely pretty medium.
I think I'm going to play 4 on Saturday just because of scam idiots. If you think that I shouldn't play, I mean, Roman told me that he didn't add Sanctifier back, and Roman and Rebel have both been beating scam without it. So I don't know. I played scam one time.
It doesn't seem to me like an exciting card, because you just like you play gear 2 against scam, right? So
I play whatever gear the dealer gives me.
Yeah, but
if it's up to me, I'll play gear 2.
But scam only wins. Give it to me. I mean, scam's a pretty classic deck that only wins through dealing damage with creatures, right? So it's just like a killer creature.
Yeah, but Fury is really hard to gear 2. Like they can get to like 4/4 on turn 1 on the play. I mean, it's hard to gear 2 that. Like, it's not impossible.
Yeah,
and it take like 16 damage.
Okay,
and then
so you're well, then you can just play. Then it's better to play Burrington Forge Tender, right?
I'm not playing that. I don't play like people who play cards like Wear Tear don't want to win, right? Like Burrington Forge Tender to me is a Wear Tear. I'd rather play a Core Firewalker, right? And that contains.
Yeah, I'm down for Firewalker too. Because you're just looking for something that blocks. You're literally just looking for something that blocks. The exile clause is effectively not relevant.
We need to put in the show notes that at
17 minutes. Yeah. I'm going to.
We're going to switch back to pre-modern.
Yeah, we'll talk about pre-modern eventually. But it's been like we haven't caught up, so we have to catch up during the podcast, and then we talk pre-modern, and we specifically have to continue our trend of like not providing our listeners with any context about what we're saying, so we just just leave them confused. I expect this is going to be like our top 5 most listened episodes, given how things are going so far.
But
this is what I've learned to expect.
Be our paradigm. I want people to understand the things that we're talking about. It was like 2021, and I came to the conclusion that I had just made it difficult for people to understand me for the first 45 years of my life. That I could have just made myself easier to understand, and I would have reached more people and been more compelling and more persuasive. And that, I had put myself in this position where I was just like, oh, I'm such a genius. Everybody should just come to me on the terms that I want. But that's just not the best way to deal with people.
I think you're still struggling with this. Which is very
now
interesting
I'm at least
stuff.
Aware of it.
That's fair. That's a very.
Trying,
big steps. Big steps. I mean, I appreciate the self. One of my favorite things about you as my old man friend is that you are always seeking to improve, and I really appreciate that character trait. I think it's a cornerstone of our friendship. And me too. We're both seeking to improve.
But you're mostly like seeking to improve your sequencing with like a prison deck.
Yeah. I mean, it's true.
Whereas I'm seeking to improve my Zen position in the universe, which is probably going to manifest itself in
sequencing and prison decks.
Yeah, maybe sequencing like which red 1-drop I should play first.
I was looking at Antonio Padial's second place Landstill deck, which is like a time traveler's deck. 3 Disenchant, 3 Factor Fiction, 3 Decree of Justice, 4 Standstill. Like he just got in the blue police box and then was at the Easter Championships 2021 with his Landstill deck. Right, 2 Dust Bowl, no Arcane Lab. This is like literally, let's hit Huey Lewis in the news.
I mean, it looks to me like a Landstill deck. None of the things that were different about Landstill excite me. I do like 4 Dust Bowl and I like Arcane Lab, but
do you not really appreciate the nuance and the radical improvements in deck design in Landstill over the last year between Lan and myself and Tom Metelsky? Like the Landstill decks now are so good compared to the Landstill decks from 2 years ago. Like they're wildly better, and it makes me a little sad that you don't understand how much better they are.
I mean, this deck is just 3 main deck Phyrexian Furnace off from Selden's list, and it's got mages in the side, which you like anyways.
Yeah, but it's just like, Selden's list was not the list, right? You want to have like some Selden, some Landiho, some Tom Metelsky, put it all together, and you have like 4 Dust Bowls and Arcane Labs and, Seals because they're better heads up against meddling mages than disenchants are, right? Like you just want all those things.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree. I just think that you overstate how many points it gets you.
You don't think there's a difference between a deck that can have a Forbid Lock with Arcane Lab with 4 Dust Bowls and a deck that doesn't have that capability?
I mean, like, I just don't.
I mean, just like auto win.
It just doesn't. It doesn't get me out of bed. Like I'm just like, you're like, hey, I've got this deck. It's so good. I'm like, well, I don't like that deck. And they're like, well, at least it's better than the other deck that
you like these stupid prison decks. And I'm just like describing to you a situation where your opponent wouldn't be able to bust out of just cards that are not in these other decks. And you're like, oh, that's just cards.
I like
would have to
I like it. I'm telling you that I like it. I'm just telling you that it's not going to turn me into a Landstill stand, a standstill land.
I mean, I am a Landstill
standstill land stand.
Let's look at this third place deck. This deck is a baller.
All right.
It's 12-12 with main deck Duress. I like a sleight of hand. He has 3 sleight of hand, does Pablo Cubedo, 3 Lotus Petal. So he's asking the dealer for some help, and the dealer got him two slots from number 1. Limdul's Vault.
Third place, which is the Spike Colony favored tournament outcome.
Wow, this deck doesn't actually do anything better than the other decks, but it's got some spice to it.
Yeah, it's got Lotus Petal. I mean,
Lotus Petal for land.
Duress. Well, no, because it's got 3 Lotus Petal and 17 land, so it's up. Yeah, it's up 2 mana sources, 2 or 3 mana sources on most lists. Duress is the same thing as 1 mana, whatever.
Duress is basically peak.
No, Duress is you gotta pull your opponent's relevant interaction. It's good. I mean, I've always thought that blue black is at least like more playable than it seems. I mean, it's definitely.
I think I'd rather play mono blue than this deck. To be honest, TBH.
I don't know. I think Duress. I don't know. Duress is pretty sweet. I mean, like Duress Cabal Therapy. Like obviously Cabal Therapy against non-interactive decks, like that are just going to plan to have like 3 Plowshares in hand. Like that's the same thing as Meddling Mage. So
and Limdul's Vault.
It's a buy.
It doesn't get you out of the situation. Like this deck has no way to get you out of the situations that you don't win.
I mean, like Limdul's Vault is hilarious, right? Because somewhere in your deck, a Gush is standing next to a a Fire Exchange Dreadnought, and
Right,
like
look,
that rules.
Okay,
Like,
so-
can you just imagine? I'm like, oh,
Yes, I
this
can
one's
imagine.
good. Pay one. Oh, sweet. This
is how
pile
low-
has Gush Foil Dreadnought.
Let's
Let's go.
play this way before we figured out the good 12-12 decks. This deck has an Boomerang to fight Meddling Mage, which is the best creature in the format. I think
It's actually got 1 Boomerang and 3 Limdus Waltz. So
And
you just
Boomerang.
look for the Boomerang.
What if the Meddling Mage was on Boomerang, Pablo Cabedo? Doesn't
second
get
one.
anything out of sideboard that matters. 1 Vendetta, 1 Engineered Plague. Come on, Lanny, this is poop.
I mean, it doesn't excite me, but it like I appreciate that it finished well.
I also appreciate it. I like it.
Let's talk about place number 4. This deck is gonna blow your mind.
Jose Maria Toledo. Now that is the name of a champion. Jose Maria Toledo. 1 Scion of Darkness. I don't know what this is. I have to look at it. 8 mana for a 6/6. Well, we're there on rate to start. 8 mana for a 6/6. Trample Avatar. Whenever Scion of Darkness deals combat damage to a player, you may put target creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, cycling 3. And it's an avatar. Is there any way to get this for free? No.
I would keep reading. You're 3 slots away from the card.
Shepherd of Rot. This is like just giving me nightmares of the match that I had against Aaron Dix, my anti-penultimate match in the PSS. That was humiliating. Cabal Archon. 3 mana for a 2/2. B, sacrifice a cleric. Target player loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. I am still not excited yet. For Dark Supplicant. Okay, I don't know what any of these cards do, but maybe that would have been an edge that Jose Maria Toledo, name of champions, would have had over me. B, for a 1/1. Not excited. Creature cleric. Tap, sacrifice 3 clerics. Okay. Ready to sacrifice clerics. Search your graveyard, hand, and or library for a card named Scion of Darkness and put it into play. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. I mean, is there a way to get haste? Like, how do you keep the opponent from killing your Dark Supplicant? Like, if I saw a Dark Supplicant, like this would be, I think I wrote an article called the Dave Price Rule. So Dave Price, Pro Tour LA champion, had a rule, which was, if you don't know what a thing is or you don't know what a thing does, you just kill it immediately. So if somebody summons a Dark Supplicant against you, then you just danger Will Robinson. And then you point your lava dart at it immediately. They'd be like, hey, this is a 1/1 for 1 with no text. I agree. How bad can my opponent be? Maybe that text is not actually 0 text. And there's other God, Cabal Archon is not a good magic card. Shepherd of Rot is an okay magic card, but there's not that many zombies. This is a cleric's deck. Priest of Gix is unplayable. If Dark Ritual is not good, Dark Ritual for 3 is it's really can't be good. This card was played heavily in the Hatred decks around 1998. Those of us who missed breakers at the national and international levels with their Hatred decks, or repeatedly won at the local level, i.e. PTQs, regional championships, etc. with Hatred, cut Priest because it's not good. A Dark Ritual for 3 is not good. So this card is not good, although it is a cleric. It's a 3 casting cost cleric with negative text. Rotlung Reanimator. This card's pretty good. So 2/2 for 3. Whenever Rotlung Reanimator or another cleric is put into a graveyard from play, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token into play. If your opponent wants to fight against your clerics theme deck on a fair axis and for some reason doesn't have the best card in the format, Swords to Plowshares, I can see Rotlung Reanimator having some text. Withered Wretch. Well, you tell me what you think about Withered Wretch.
Well, I love Withered Wretch in this deck because it has creature type zombie cleric. So it turns
What about in general? Like, what if this was just being evaluated as a magic?
Withered Wretch is a horrible card.
Instead of a card that might be sacrificed to Dark Supplicant.
But literally, if it was BB blank text box, zombie cleric 2/2, I'm in on this deck. And then blank text box like for the rest of the format would be like extremely helpful to like every other Magic player in pre-modern. It's just it's a 2/2 for BB and it's a zombie cleric. So sometimes it's a 3/3 thanks to Lord of the Undead or Bad Moon.
There's no Lord of the Undead or Bad Moon in this.
Well, there's Shepherd of the Rot, there's Rotlung Reanimator, and there's of course Dark Supplicant. Mike, I'm just gonna cut you off here. I love this deck. This deck is hysterical. It's running.
I didn't love this deck.
It's running.
I love this deck with an R.
It's running Dark Supplicant, which is just Goblin Lackey and Cleric's Close. And what's better than Goblin Lackey and Cleric's Close? You don't even have to have the Goblin Goon in your hand. You pull it out of your deck. You've just got a bunch of guys. You've got Reach in the form of Shepherd of Rot, Cabal Archon, and a one of all-timer Karavik Spite. You can't consult for this one, but doesn't matter. We'll just draw it. 4-pack of Dark Ritual, 3-pack of Unearth. Unearth in conjunction with Priest of Gix turns into a Dark Ritual. But Priest of Gix, man, you're just putting more material on the battlefield faster, right? You can just go turn 1 Ritual, Priest of Gix, I don't know, Scion.
You're looking at the deck list. You can't do a playable card. I love it.
Dark Supplicant, Shepherd of the Rot. Okay, listen. So this is ideal turn 1, right? You go Ritual, Priest, Supplicant, any other cleric, right? Can be Withered Wretch, which is a cleric. Might I remind you, it's the only good thing it's good at is being a cleric and a zombie. Then turn 2, you Ritual again. And you play this Rotlung Reanimator. You sacrifice 3 clerics. You get 3 zombies, and you get your Scion of Darkness from anywhere in the game. Anywhere in the game. Can be your hand, your library, your graveyard.
Probably going to be in my hand because that's
how lucky you are. Yeah,
this one went.
Doesn't matter. I played against this deck. Online, just like casual matches played online. I was testing
not a casual match when you're playing online.
I mean, there's the tournament playoffs, of course. And so I was just playing no stakes, and I was testing out my mono red goblins deck, and my
That's
opponent.
That's the deck I can get behind.
My opponent. How many
ancient tombs? How many?
All four.
All the ancient tombs.
All of the ancient tombs, please. And my goblins can't get past this deck. Because it makes unlimited 2/2 blockers.
Just almost spit take snorted out my nose when you said that.
It literally can't. Because one, goblins can't answer a Scion of Darkness.
Yeah, sure it can.
So if it can't.
Sure it can.
It can't. Have you tried? Try.
No.
We'll play.
I'm going to threaten this thing. Threaten. When Gabriel Nassif played Goblins to the finals of Pro Tour Valencia or whatever, Venice, whatever year that was, he had Threaten in his Goblin deck.
Yeah, I mean, we're threatening Scions, we're threatening Terravors, we're threatening Phyrexian Dreadnoughts. But, short of Threaten, Scion of Darkness is just going to end the game versus you. And it's going to end the game in hilarious fashion because you have to block it with 6 power. Because if you block it with 5 toughness.
Here's a guy. Let's go.
They're going to get your Goblin Lackey. Anyways.
So
this deck is
like to revise my position. Not revise. I want to clarify my position. I love this deck. It has no good cards. But I love it. It has sweet cards on the sideboard. Bad Moon's good.
I love the bad. I'm gonna need Jose to send us a message on Discord or Twitter or Facebook about these sideboard Bad Moons, because this man was so pessimistic about his game against the field that he was gonna run into another deck containing black creatures that he put his Bad Moons in the sideboard. He's like, nah, pretty bad card, and really really bad in the mirror. It's just like, what? You're not gonna play against a deck with black creatures.
What is with all these decks that don't have
black creatures are so bad?
Like the 12-12 deck we just look at had an engineered plague, right? Like Pablo Cabeto's deck had 1 engineered plague.
Don't ask me.
This deck has 3 engineered plagues.
There's nothing I enjoy more than drawing multiple copies of engineered plague against a deck that's named after a creature type.
Yeah, because the second one might help you win, because the first one, they all know that the first one is coming.
It's true. It's true. And you have like no way to fix your draws. I mean, a deck like this, like with no card selection, just 4-4-4-3 your sideboard.
Not meaning to like put the dragon out of the bag or anything, but how many Rourke's Bladewing in your mono red deck?
4.
4 Roark Bladewing. Why?
Because you can't draw
Because
it.
you can't beat engineered play, right? Like, so
You have to draw. Yeah, you have to
Right,
draw
so like,
Roark Bladewing
This is like new old tech, right?
or
So
Goblin Goon.
when I used to play goblins back in the day, we're talking about 18 years ago at this point, right? I was a mono Roark Bladewing man. I was famous for saying the words 2 sets of wings. If you look at Roark Bladewing, the MFer has 2 sets of wings, right? Second set is for haste.
Yeah. Well, no, it's for blades. He's got his normal wings and then he's got his blade wings, which he's named after.
Right?
Yeah,
so I was super into that. Why? Because I assumed people would kill my stupid goblins.
Yeah. Kill this.
Like, I mean, you know who's going to kill your goblins? Other goblin decks. Because like sometimes they had haste and you didn't, and they were like sharpshooter or sparksmith. Let's go. No one plays sparksmith.
Yeah.
That guy is sweet.
And some opponents are going to be oathing out exalted angels, and you're going to need a brawl with those angels.
I mean, a sparksmith kills Sign of Darkness or exalted angel really easily. So it's funny to me that nobody plays it. Just tap my guy. Kill you.
I mean, you can matron for the incinerator. I mean, I see what you're saying.
No, it's how about I do it a second time?
Yeah.
How about I do it a third time? How about it never cost me any mana?
Well, just quit asking for lists and build the goblins list yourself, man. You're always you're always hitting up the Discord.
Deck designers of all time.
You're just
I'm just pointing basic things out, right? Like I watched somebody sideboard against Rebel and Rebel beat them. And I was just like, he was just like, oh, how do you think I sideboarded? And I'm like, I think you lost the game before you started. And he's like, why? I'm like, you over sideboarded. Like if you're playing goblins, you can't bring in this many cards. And the reason for that is because you're biasing your draws towards Goblin Lackey and Goblin Ringleader, and your average Goblin Ringleader got you like nothing, right? Or you're not going to connect with Goblin Lackey. You need to not have that many like pyrokinesis after sideboarding. You need to be very judicious about this. I think that people don't play enough Goblin Tinkerers. That you should play long on Tinkerer, long on Sharpshooter. Why? Because they say Goblin on them. But like you can't play this deck that has like these uber explosive draws based on Goblin Lackey and Goblin Ringleader and then just never get money for them. Otherwise, they're like Smiths. One of the reasons that Smiths lost to you at LobsterCon, even though he had that seriously, any normal person would have conceded 3 times before you locked that game down, right?
It's the top 8. Nobody concedes in the top 8.
Yeah, it was because he was just like connecting with Goblin Lackey and like putting a Mog Fanatic in play, right? He had all the sweet interplay cards, but no clock.
Well, he's in damned if you do, damned if you don't territory, right? So as demonstrated in like every Goblins versus Parfait match of all time, triggering Oath of Druids is really bad news for the Goblins deck. And again, with no way to control your draws, the only way you solve this problem is by having a naturalized post board, because you can't overpower Oath of Druids, which either gains a 20 life or wipes your board.
And if you have like 2 kings. You have 2 kings and a lot of luck. You can overcome it.
Yeah, but would you rather draw 2 kings or 1 copy of Naturalize followed by another copy of Naturalize?
I'm not saying by the way, I'm not saying he did wrong. I think that dude had an insane draw. I think that you are the hero of ages for pulling that game out. All I'm saying is just like that is a good example of a goblin deck decreasing its concentration of threat.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
we're no longer playing against land tax decks.
Yeah, exactly.
Druids,
so,
right? Like,
well, okay. So this is an important distinction. So, how many Naturalize do you want in your deck against Engineered Plague? Post board.
Well, I mean, naturalizes or naturalize effects.
Naturalize effects.
Right. So I get access to, well, it also depends what deck I'm playing against and what my other interplay is, right? If I'm playing against the Rock, I feel like I don't need as many. Right. If I'm playing against like black red, I might not play any. Right. Like,
yeah, I guess this is a weird discussion because there's not too many Engineered Plague decks besides the Rock. I mean, obviously it's a card that any deck can bust out.
Yeah,
like Grotog can play Engineered Plague.
So like the thing is, like, if you're playing against black red and you're worried about how many times you're going to disenchant them, they're just going to kill you. Right. Like you have all these cards that don't deal any damage, and then they're just going to like cast a Dark Ritual, Insidious Dreams on tap and 16 you. So like you can't worry about. I mean, the thing is, they probably have access to Engineered Plague if they want it. So you kind of have to beat them by being faster.
Right. So how many naturalizes do you want in your deck against a deck that has Oath of Druids, Enlightened Tutor, and then Phoenix Chosen Acroma package post board?
Max, however many I have.
Exactly, right? Right. So this is an important distinction. In the parfait days, you would want to play, you would want to play every single just fire everything, right? Put everything in the cannons, try to stop this Oath of Druids. And then in the post-parfait days, there are a few decks running around, Super Secret Brew from yours truly, and of course, Landy Hoth, which has once again reprised the Chosen Phoenix Oath package, and that's just really hard for goblins to deal with, especially when you add a chroma into the falling, and then the sideboard games. And so like you want max disenchant. Now, notably, super interesting question.
Our hero was undefeated against goblins at the Sacred Torch.
Yeah. So super interesting question. How many naturalize should goblins have against Oathpauloosh?
Ooh, interesting. Because
Oaths can't kill you. In fact, it doesn't even come close to killing you.
I actually think that, so this is a great example of kind of what I was trying to get at. I think they should just be long on Tinkerers, right? And long on Sharpshooters, not necessarily like long on Pyrokinesis and Disenchant effects, because like I would have max Tinkerers in this matchup. As many Tinkerers I had access to would be in my deck.
You just want to blow up Moxes?
Like, Moxes is the obvious thing, right? But like, you could just tinker lots of stuff. But like, their other artifacts aren't very. Actually, after sideboarding, they probably have like Zurin Orb, right? So,
I don't know. I mean, they might have one.
That's how many they have, Lanny.
Yeah.
I mean, but like
up to one, between 0 and 1.
Place one in his main deck.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah.
So like they're not even going to have sphere of resistance against you after sideboarding. It's not good against Lackey. And it's like, you also have like the same sort of Wasteland Rishadan Port interplay that they have. Like their symmetrical land destruction is just not that good against goblins. So I guess they're I don't know. I guess you have to deal with Oath. Maybe you don't even like their Oath creatures aren't good. Like you just don't lose to a Terravor, or like you just go through a Terravor.
Yeah. I mean, in the coverage. Yeah. You can't go through.
You don't necessarily go through an Exalted Angel, but like you just kill it.
Yeah. No,
right?
I mean, I think it's super interesting. Although maybe it's worth noting that having like dense ringleader hits is like less important if you're going to play an explosive game. I mean, it's just such an interesting question. Like,
so if I were going to construct my own goblin deck, so like I almost, which is like, I can't play this deck because I don't have enough reps. I'm just going to play goblins. My 75 is just Doucette goblins, right? Because we tested before the PSS top 4, and that's the version you wanted me to make, and I just haven't updated it. If I were going to make my own deck, I would have way more Tinkerers, way more Sharpshooters after sideboarding. And I mean, Doucette already has access to 4 copies of Gem Palm Incinerator, but I would keep that. So I think that like Paloosh Goblins, which only has total 2 copies of Gem Palm Incinerator, is too low, right? Like they're very good in the mirror, and they're very good in these situations where you wouldn't necessarily imagine them to be good, right? Like I played in the original Goblins versus Exalted Angel era, and Exalted Angels don't live against Gem Palm Incinerators unless there's a Astrocide in play, right? If there's an Astrocide in play, you could just piggyback the Gem Palm Incinerator to phase out.
Right. So it'll never, yeah.
Yeah. But like, if there's not, like, it's really easy to tag team that Gem Palm Incinerator with a Mog Fanatic or a Sparksmith or a Gem Palm, a Goblin Sharpshooter to make sure that a 4/5 is just not big against
but it becomes a different equation because you like your Oath of Druids means your opponent adds to the battlefield every turn.
Yeah.
So if you're wide, then you are not likely to be able to suppress you need to suppress and get damage in at the same time, right? No. Because they're eventually going to put a 20/20 into play, and then you're
okay. Do you know how like when Lan was saying that like it's not fair because I actually formulated a strategy against his deck and like other people just didn't formulate a strategy against the deck so he gets default wins. Like I've actually thought about how I would play against Oathpauloosh from a bunch of situations. So Landstill is a better example because I don't think I would ever lose.
Yeah, well, we're not going to leak. We're not going to leak the Landstill strat to winning versus Oathpauloosh. But goblins, we've talked about
on
this.
The goblin side, who cares about a 2020? I'm going to go through you.
Yeah, right? I mean,
like, and so like the thing that you have to figure out what axis you're on. And the Oathpauloosh deck, they like to bully people with Wasteland and Rishadan Port so that they can set up a Cataclysm, and then they have to get, in certain matchups, they have to get leverage from Oath of Druids. They don't get leverage from Oath of Druids. They're just a deck with 32 mana sources. A probably has many ways as I could kill Oath of Druids I would want after sideboarding, but you're not going to bully me with Rishadan Port Wasteland. I have the same stuff as you. You're never going to pull off the Cataclysm, so don't think about it. Right? Like the Goblins game plan is to literally go straight through you. And your first Terravore might be too small. Also, I would play Sparksmith. And I think the fact that people don't play Sparksmith is insane.
Yeah, right? I mean, so we saw it on camera at the Sacred Torch Showdown when Tom played against Sitsis and made the minor misstep of sacrificing all of his offense to put a ringleader onto the table. But that went about as poorly for Tom as it possibly could have, and he still would have won because Sitsis opened oaths a creature every single turn in addition to playing another creature. So Tom's opening was Lackey Go. Sitsis has land go, no plow, right? So Tom connects and puts Siege Gang into play and then follows up with another Lackey. And then Sitsis gets his first oath trigger on turn Sitsis responds with an oath. Tom gets in. Sitsis gets his first oath trigger, but then he gets a hard cast of Terravore. So then he has 2 Terravores in play against Tom's offense. So overwhelming the oath in this case is like super solid because the Lackey got in, right? And then at that point, you're adding more goblins to the board than 1 Terravore or 1 Exalted Angel a turn will do. And of course, if you're running Siege Gangs into the red zone, that Exalted Angel is not going to gain any life. So Tom was, of course, this close to just overwhelming the defense created by Oath of Druids. But I think that the multiple things that goblins can do is always like addressable from different vantage points. So because the game is going to be at least somewhat decided by the presence of non-basic lands, goblins can't accumulate the like unbelievable turn of just like 0 creatures on battlefield to like 12 damage of haste, right? Because that has to beat Swords to Plowshares and you need enough mana to do it. And like if you're constantly under the threat of Cataclysm and you're trying to port waste the Oath player off of Cataclysm, then they can put you in a position where they're not going to let you accumulate the lands. Don't get me
wrong. I think that it's a fight, right? It's a fight, but it's not like I feel like the Goblins players they have game and they can think about the strategy that they would bring to bear against Oathpauloosh. Like I feel like if you watch you or you watch Fran on camera, it just looks like Oathpauloosh is this invincible deck. People just haven't thought about trying to beat it, and I won't necessarily tell everybody how to beat it.
I mean, I can tell you,
been beaten with Oathpauloosh in front of me. There's a lot of ways you can lose games.
No, I mean that's definitely true. I think that but that's kind of the place that you're at, which is just that like you're playing a deck that's like naturally powerful, right? And you do get like this kind of segues into like somebody tweeted recently that like good players don't get good data on their decks because they feel like their deck can beat anything because they're a good player, right?
Ev from Vancouver. That's who I beat in the finals of the Modern RCQ I won last year, and he runs Spice Rack now.
Oh, okay, nice. Yeah, so
Vancouver.
So I love this tweet because it's like very true about pre-modern.
There's no way this tweet is true. I responded to him, there's no way this is true.
It's like so true in pre-modern.
There is not a causal relationship with somebody being good. You are like worse understanding.
You are like the poster child for this because you'll be like, I never lose this deck. So yeah, we have a good matchup. And you just like say that about everything, about every matchup, about every deck.
There's lots of decks that have bad matchups.
With like very few exceptions. And then your exceptions are like contrarian, right? Because they'll be out there.
Okay. To be clear, my number one thing that I say about people in their strategic game is they don't understand matchups. So if I have a contrarian opinion, my guess is that I understand the matchup well and they don't understand the matchup.
No, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I'm on team Michael J. I just think that you're the poster child for like somebody who like in bad matchups, like basically can figure out how to outplay your opponent, and somebody in like, you know, like who's going to get bad data from that.
This is Lan's favorite example. I think he used it on the podcast when he was on, where he's just like, for years, Mike would just say Affinity was a good matchup for Bird. And I was just like, that's because I always won, right? He's just like, there's like an overwhelming amount of data on MTG Goldfish that like, this is a 75% matchup for Affinity. And I'm like, Roman and I played in countless tournaments. We never lost to Affinity. Like, that leads me to believe that everybody else was wrong, right? Like, I mean, it's just
right. But this is like a super interesting thing, right?
So like, that I'm wrong.
Let's say
they're all wrong,
right? But let's just like this is like what's so interesting about that concept, which is just like, okay, like now somebody's gonna go and they're gonna like net deck Michael J. Byrne, and then they're gonna get paired against Affinity, and then they're gonna be like, sweet, Michael J. says I win this, and then they're gonna lose it because they don't know what they're doing, right? And so, somewhat inherently. Okay. So actually, let's
for a second.
Let's break this down.
I had invented Gear 2. Okay. So I taught Roman Gear 2 and I taught Joey Pasco Gear 2. Right. So they were like, this matchup super favors Affinity if you look at the math. And this is how I explained it at the time. Right. I said, you both draw one card per turn. Okay. If the card that you draw per turn is ever Grim Lavamancer, you always win the game. If you configure your deck such that you can't ever draw a card that doesn't interact with the battlefield. They're like, what do you mean by that? And I said, in sideboarded games, side out every card that is only face burn. Side out all the lava spikes and all the Boros charms. If you have cards like Skullcrack, side them out. I'm like, why? Boros charm is really powerful. It deals 4. I'm like, but it doesn't interact with the battlefield. You are playing against a deck that can only win with creature damage. So if you both draw one card per turn, and sometimes your card is Smash the Smithereens, and sometimes your card is Searing Blaze, and sometimes your card is Searing Blood, but you both only draw one card per turn, they can mathematically never beat you, right? But no one else seemed to understand this because they were playing Gear 1. That doesn't mean that I'm wrong. No. It means they don't understand A, how to sideboard, B, what the matchup is about. And in fact, this is inescapable for Affinity. So like, Affinity has a 75% matchup against morons who are trying to play Gear 1 against 5/5 creatures, right? Like, don't do that. It's super easy to only draw cards like Smash the Smithereens and Path to Exile if they're in your deck. And if you ever draw the card Grim Lavamancer, you are a lock to win. They can now no longer ever deal damage to you with a Blink Moth. All of their fundamental creatures die on the spot. They can only beat with creature damage. Like, that's the thing that, like, I just don't understand how people can't wrap their head around. This is a very simple concept.
Yeah, I mean, this is like this is like
he's just like, you're right. You could never lose. I'm like, I know.
Somehow
you can never lose.
Yeah. Somehow
humans, right? So I actually beat the guy to make top 8 of modern championships like the next week, who had won the classic with humans. He was like the one who put humans on the map. He's just like, oh, this is a super easy matchup, and I'm like, I'm gonna destroy you. And he's just like, you have your stupid like tutus or whatever. Obviously, I destroy him. I got a standing ovation, right? Like, people are watching because this is a top 8 match, right? So whoever wins is going to make top 8, right? He's so salty. I'm like, why are you so salty? He's like, I should never lose this match. I'm like, you don't understand. You could never have won, right? Like, I don't have any cards in my deck that don't say kill a creature that you play. Your deck draws one card per turn. How do you plan to beat a Grim Lavamancer and a Searing Blood? It's mathematically impossible, right? Like, but you're just here like, I'm so mad that I didn't win with my 2/1 creature. Like, it's a freaking joke. Like, people have to willfully play like a donkey.
All right. We got it. No. I mean, you're totally right in the sense that, like, then you have like another layer above, which is just that like, okay, if you're going to sit down against an opponent who knows what they're doing and you know what you're doing, then you actually have a matchup. And that's like why testing is so important. So, but like the rest of the time,
if like I would make is these matchups are not solvable from the other side, the way that people have configured their decks, right?
No.
In the future, if they want to,
that's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying that like you have like the proletariat, you have the plebeian masses just jamming leagues and games and whatever. And then you have like, you know, Pro Tour testing teams that are like actually figuring out how these like decks interact with each other. Right. So like, I don't know, take Tron, for example. Right. So Tron was just like a deck that didn't exist in the form that, Handshake Tron, which like, you know, top 8 of the Pro Tour, or got second place in Pro Tour in the hands of Christian Kalk.
Colcano was not playing Handshake Tron. He was playing Classic Tron.
Oh, okay,
Handshake
cool.
Tron put multiple copies into the top 8, but Colcano was just playing regular Tron.
Okay, fair
Handshake
enough.
Tron had actual ways to interact with Dothy Voidwalker, and Colcano lost to a Dothy Voidwalker.
Yeah, of course. Famously. So
famously lost to the turn 2 Voidwalker. The Handshake Tron would have been able to interact with it. But
yeah. But in any case, like, you know, this is the kind of stuff that happens where like, you know, people like, Sam was on our podcast and he was just like, I don't believe that any format that wasn't played in the Pro Tour is a solved format. So that includes, you know, that included the standard format at the time, which was played at the RC, and then people show up with like an interesting deck and strategy. So
including Sam had one of the most interesting
exactly
takes at that time.
So like, I don't know, just like reduce this down to pre-modern. Let's just go ahead and just say it. Like, one, even if you consider us to be probably the most, like, you know, like the group that we play with to be like the most focused or most solid testers in the world, which like just, you know, isn't necessarily true because we can't encompass what other people are doing. And some of us are too busy running marathons and,
David has been doing his whiskey business,
starting O2 in tournaments, to do any data gathering with our friends, and, other friends are like, Fran's volume of play has gone down. He's been busy with life stuff. I'm at least moderately busy with life stuff, but yeah, in the absence of focused playtest partners, I'm busy brewing decks that contain 4 Carnophage, 4 Sarcomancy, 4 Jackal Pup, and 4 Savannah Lions. Instead of getting anything done. So
wait, pause. This has not happened in front of me. Is this like the equal and opposite to all those Friday nights where you yelled at me for making you play against some terrible control deck?
I didn't make you play against anything.
No. I haven't. Terrible control
deck. I'm saying that it's not the equal and opposite because I have not made you play against any deck.
Beatdown deck? Like, here's this unplayable beatdown deck.
Yeah, but I don't
beat an oath.
I don't
or a powder keg.
I don't use the time I don't use the time that we play against each other.
Valuable family time.
Like I don't use valuable family time to waste on bad decks. Like I only bring
that deck.
I only bring important stuff to the gauntlet. But anyways, the point is, this data, like, I appreciate the efforts of the people who've done aggregation on like the top 8s, and they're just like, oh, this deck is successful and this deck is like whatever. But I'm just going to echo a classic Michael J thing, which is that there's no tier list metagame for pre-modern. Like you literally would have to do so much work to like actually produce like some sort of like good matchup data on pre-modern of just being like, okay, like, you know, goblins beats elves, right? But like, you can still roll up to a tournament with elves and beat every goblins players in the room. Like that's in the range because like you're not going to beat the best goblins player, but you're probably like going to stand a chance.
Like I think I am. I don't think I'm as good as Ole. I'm probably not as good as the reigning European champion, but I think I'm better than most people on elves. And I don't put myself in being an average player with goblins.
Okay, I mean, fair enough. So maybe that's the range that you've decided. But like, let's go ahead and talk about some other. Let's talk about contested matchups, right? Let's talk about like. I just want to
pause and acknowledge the thing that you just said, which is you're talking about Sam. Isn't Sam's Discord called Challenge Assumptions?
Yeah.
So that's actually the whole point of what I was saying before, which is that like people just don't do things like side out Lava Spike in their Lava Spike deck because they just don't like. They just don't get it. They're like, this is what my deck is supposed to do. But that's just gear 1, right? And gear 1 is the shittiest gear. Like people are just like, I'm gear 1. That's a great recipe for doing 18 damage.
No.
Congratulations.
I mean, challenging assumptions is like the name of Sam's credo, and that's like kind of that's I don't know. That figures into the entire point, right? Which is just that like, okay, we assume a lot of things about pre-modern, and basically none of them are true, but like the opposite isn't true either. So like, you're just like, oh, okay, well, burn always beats the rock. It's like, well, burn doesn't always beat the rock. Like sometimes rock beats burn, and like, it just doesn't matter because everybody plays everybody plays a different list. Right. And then everybody like does different things like with those lists, right? So like generally speaking, like I got into this argument so many times. I was just like, listen, the rock doesn't beat burn. Like it beats burn like maybe 2 out of 10 matches. And then they're just like, oh, well, what's your list? I'm like, well, my list is 4 Sulfuric Vortex, 4 Price of Progress. And they're just like, well, I don't run that. And I'm like, well, those are
make your deck better.
I was like, those are good cards. Like those, like why wouldn't you run these cards, which are very flexible and very powerful in your red deck? Like, what are you running instead? And it's like, I run
like
Goblin Patrol. Like, I don't know. I'm like,
I was having this conversation with Binary Soloist yesterday, and I'm like, I would never play Goblin Patrol. It's very bad. He's just like, oh, but it seems like, it's in some lists. And I'm like, it's not a list that I would make.
Yeah. I mean, I get it. Don't get me wrong. I understand. They're like, oh, we want the curve to be lower. We want more 1-drops. We want that. I'm like, okay, well, what if the curve didn't have to?
I don't understand how Flint won that.
What if
he has no cards for the mirror. He can't even get his pups out in the mirror. There's just nothing to put in.
I mean, he wasn't prepared for the mirror. He probably didn't play against the mirror. But,
apparently not, right? Like, but not being able to get your pups out in the mirror seems horrendous to me.
All right, yeah, you're gonna have to ask Flint. But anyways, like my point is like, challenging assumptions. Just like, well, why does the curve have to be so low? Like why? Like you've got 3. Like sometimes you draw 4 lands. Sometimes you draw like 6 lands.
I think people are just obsessed with on turn 4.
And yeah, obviously. And Berlin said it. Like Berlin was running Firebolt in his deck, which I was just like, okay, that's not good. If Firebolt was an instant,
probably guess.
I mean, it is how he conceived it, because he was like, well, sometimes I'm gonna play it. Like at least Berlin, including Firebolt, has an understanding of the gears, right? Because he's like, well some games I'm gonna bolt a thing, and then I'm going to flash back that bolt once I have 5 lands, because some games go long and I need like some semblance of card advantage in my deck.
In the abstract, how does a Firebolt compare to a Seal of Fire? In the abstract,
it does twice as much damage.
No, I mean, like it's the same, right? Sorcery speed 2-pointer with like some upside.
Yeah. Right.
Seal of Fire is often better, but like a lot of the time you're just casting a Seal of Fire and using it immediately. Like Firebolt does the same thing. It's like I made this argument when I wrote the official Miser's Guide, and I wrote this section on the Grand Unified Theory of Magic, which is that like people put too much emphasis on instants. Like instants don't actually contribute to rate, right? So they're just like, oh no, well these cards are better because they're instant. I'm like, I listened to the argument that the 3-way argument that you, Tom, and Caffeinated had about like when to use removal, and you're all wrong, by the way. Like it's actually hilarious to me how wrong all 3 of you were, and you were criticizing Tom, and Tom was the closest to right.
All right, so, lay it on us.
All right, so you should use instant speed removal so as a general rule, right? So in any individual game of Magic, what you're supposed to do as the optimal play will depend on a lot of factors that are local to that episode of the series, right? Like there's stuff going on. It might be better to do this thing that you wouldn't do in a different game, etc. Right? But like when you're saying, okay, I'm obsessed with using Pernicious Deed at the end of my opponent's turn, I'm going to take X amount of damage just so I can do this thing, right? That's an interesting rule, right? That is the rule for somebody who plans to clean up the game on the next turn. And decks with Pernicious Deed can't clean up the game the next turn.
Yeah,
right? Let's be honest. Okay,
one, obviously an exaggeration, but two,
I
am obsessed with it, and like the whole point is just
it's fine.
It's just a tempo, like stealing
rules,
tempo, yeah.
Right? Like, so Caffeinated is obsessed with like using his instance, right? Just like, oh well, I really didn't like what you were saying, Tom, about being mana efficient, because then I lose the optionality of using the instance. Like, well, Tom is the closest to right? And so. Like as a general rule, so I'm bad about this. This is like if you look at somebody's everybody has different things that are wrong with their game. I am like, I read an article in 1997 that said you will win more if you tap all your mana every turn, and I ran with it, right? So so I'm bad about that. But on average, it's just better to use your removal when you have control of the most variables. And you have control of the most variables on your own turn. So here's just the easiest example. If you use an instant speed removal on your opponent's turn instead of using instant speed removal on your own turn, you might be foiled by a giant growth. Right? Like, so my opponent is attacking, like lightning bolt this, they might giant growth you. Not only do you not get the removal to have happen, but now you're going to get an extra 3 damage.
Right. But this is like, you need to like bring this down to earth, because giant growth hasn't been played in a constructive format.
When I say a giant growth, there's like a lot of things that might happen. So I played in a modern PPTQ once, right? And all day, this guy was coming off a Grand Prix top 8, right? He was just like, I can't wait to play against you and Roman with my Death Shadow deck. And I'm like, I've never lost a Death Shadow in my life, right? And he's just like, I can't wait. We got paired in the round of 8. How many games do you think this match went?
I don't quit playing games, Mike. We know. Yeah,
okay.
We know.
Okay, right? And so one of the things that happened was he attempted to use his engineered explosives to kill my Eidolon of the Great Revel on my turn during combat. I cast the card Boros Charm, gave all of my creatures indestructible, which was not on his bingo card, and he picked up his cards because he's just like, that wasn't on my bingo card. Can't beat your Eidolon now. I'm like, yeah, you probably should have done that on your own turn. That's just an example of like,
yeah, but that's like
charm, right? Like,
yeah,
there are tricks
opponent
people are using things off label that you didn't think of.
Yeah, I mean, this is true, but there's also like, you just like, this is always part of the calculation, right? So like, you know, one important facet of this, like it's actually really hard to come up with an example in pre-modern, because pre-modern doesn't really have like interesting effects. So your opponent made a mistake simply because there's no reason not to, because there's no card that you would play that's a permanent for 2 mana before your combat phase, right? There's literally no card in your entire deck. Your opponent should know this. You wouldn't run out a second Revel before your attack step. So your opponent knows this, so they should always be blowing the explosives on their main phase. So the second interesting thing, and this actually happens every single game in pre-modern, is like, when do you bolt your opponent's Ragavan? Your opponent goes turn 1 Ragavan, you go turn 2, you have a bolt in your hand. Do you bolt on your main phase? Or do you bolt on your opponent's being in combat?
No, so I bolt whenever I think that I can resolve killing the Ragavan. So because if one of the only ways I can lose is being hit by a Ragavan.
I'll explain. So
yeah, they might have another Ragavan that they dash.
Exactly. So they might have another Ragavan they dash, but also recently, there's this card called Not Already Dead or whatever that revives the Ragavan from a bolt. So now there's like a double punish for now there's a punish for not bolting on your turn. So it used to be like you would never get punished for waiting till begin combat to bolt, so that you could always ensure against the dash Ragavan, the second dash Ragavan.
Completely.
But now
the likelihood of the opponent has twice as many outs, because they could spell pierce or I mean, I would, whatever the other like one casting is on their turn, in addition to a bunch of other things.
I mean, it depends on the Ragavan deck, right? So like, obviously, I'm just saying, like, I don't know. I mean,
they have a much lower likelihood of having a second Ragavan that they can dash there than having a counter spell or a setup card like a Thoughtseize into. I mean, I don't really care about if I get Thoughtseize, right? But like a Thoughtseize into a permission spell, which is like they could set up a really favorable thing. I mean, or you could like get an advantageous removal interaction that doesn't work very well in your opponent's turn when their mana is untapped. There's a lot of reasons why this is wrong, but I'll give you a really simple pre-modern one that came up similar to a match that Fran showed in his top 8, right? Like, imagine you could kill 12/12 on your turn, right? Or you would wait until your opponent's turn. Right. You're like, oh, I'm going to wait till my opponent's turn.
No.
One of the reasons why you wouldn't do that is because they get a draw step. Right. If they get a draw step and then all of a sudden they go like pre-combat, they play a mountain that wasn't there before, you might get flinged. Right. Like it's just so much better if you're going to if you think you can resolve your removal to do it when you have more control.
This is like so ineffective. Like, I understand. But you're like, the point is that you actually just have to make the decision based on you based on the board, right? So the dreadnought thing, the dreadnought thing is just super well trodden. Anybody who plays this format should understand that like you're playing around counterspell, vision charm, foil, days, right? So like your read on what your opponents have in that scenario are like entirely going to decide on whether or not you do the you attack the dreadnought, or you try to remove the dreadnought on your turn, their turn, you take a hit, you do it on their end step, you get an untap. Like all these things matter. Like
it depends on how much follow-up you have.
Yeah, exactly.
So like if you have a Seal of Cleansing in your hand and the mana to cast it, you have a much greater incentive to try to kill the dreadnought immediately, because if they have a foil or they have, whatever they're going to stop you with, you might be able to just follow up with the Seal of Cleansing immediately and kill it. Right? Yeah.
I mean, this is too complex to go down to heuristics.
It's not too complex. All of us have baseline rules that and that we iterate against those baselines.
But my rule is to see if my opponent has mana. Like, do I have mana for days?
Is to get the most value you can out of a.
No, it's to remove.
And if that means getting brained, you're going to get brained.
It's to remove the dreadnought. Like, I don't have a rules for dreadnoughts, because it's like, first, does my opponent have 1 or 2 mana or 4 mana untapped? Right? Does my opponent have like whatever cards in hand? Like, if they have mana on my turn, then I might as well pass to their upkeep to do anything, because if their counterspell and vision charm is in their range, at least vision charm buys me a turn of attacks. Exactly. So like all of these things, and with Seal Cleansing, you're like, oh, well, now all of a sudden Stifle and Vision Charm and Annul interact with me, and like sometimes Daze interacts with me, and sometimes I need to set up taking 12 so that I can do stuff on end. So anyways, my point, like, this is not a good example. You have not convinced me that I'm wrong about anything. Like, I'm a great heads up Magic player that makes good decisions based on the board in front of me. And one of the good decisions that I tend to make is not blowing up my whole board with Pernicious Deed on my main phase ever.
I'm not talking about just ragging on Tom for making a mistake. I'm talking about there are general rules. And I think that of the three of you, I think Tom was the closest.
They're so useless, right? Like
No, we all start with
here's the most important. Here's the most important thing I said in the last 2 weeks of Michael J. Free podcast, which is people don't know why they do anything in a game of Magic.
That's for sure.
People literally
don't know why they do anything for any reason.
Exactly. They don't know why they do something in life. Like, this is just a fact of life. Like, they only think about it. They only actually think about it if somebody's asked them after it's happened, and after it's happened is too late. It's like, why'd you
friends who describe a situation as, oh, it just happened, when they describe like an unexpected hookup with somebody, they're just like, oh, it just happened. Those things never just happen, right? Like, the other person engineered that situation if you think that it just happened, right? This is hilarious to me. Like, every time it's, oh, it's one of these just happened. He just came over and it's, it just happened.
All right.
It didn't just happen.
I'm going to cut you off there before you say something cancelable.
What's cancel?
I don't know. I'm stopping you. I'm stopping you. I don't know what's cancelable.
Younger people.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen yet, but it could happen. I'm just stopping you.
I got canceled. It just happened.
Anyways, my point is, you make a play. Okay, I mean, pretty classic. Like, we rag on Tom. Well, like, Tom.
I don't rag on Tom. You apparently repeatedly rag on Tom for a really narrow number of mistakes that he's ever made.
It's super unfair to Tom, but
I don't do that.
But no. I mean, like, I'll rag on myself, right? So, like, let's I
didn't pay for the mana leak.
Yeah, I mean, that's. Well,
it was egregious. I should have been.
Anyways, we make plenty of mistakes that we sort of like, or it's not even mistakes. We make sometimes you'll make the right play for like the wrong reason, right? Or just like no reason. Anyways, like, my point is like, what, like, I don't know. I don't know how to encapsulate this, because I've actually been thinking about this a lot, which is just that, like, I'll ask you this question, Michael J. Do you ever have a turn, like a sequence, like a moment in time in your like game of Magic, right? You're just like you're playing the rock, right? You've got a few cards in hands and you literally do not know what to do. Like, you literally don't know what to do.
Especially with the rock, like, your cards are all random.
Yeah.
Right? So Like I'll give you a really easy example. Like when I was playing against Jared in like I think playing for top 8 of the Saturday tournament at LobsterCon. In game 1, I drew all 4 of my duress. I still made a game of it, right? But like I would draw a duress and I'd be like, should I cast this duress or not?
Yeah.
Right. Like the duress doesn't have a lot of text, but it might get a naturalize. Like what are the chances he has a naturalize? So I just don't know.
Yeah.
Cast this duress.
So this is something that I wanted to run by Sam, because I wanted to see if you could reduce a this thing that I've been saying this entire time, just like tactical deck, strategy deck. Like, what if the goal for the decks that certain players like is to build a deck where they're never in a position where they don't know what to do?
That is impossible.
No, but like not. I mean, like as much as possible, right? So like, let's.
I've thought about this specific thing. Okay.
Well, let me addendum, and then I'll let you.
What is the perfect magic card from the perspective of what you've just said? There is a
Thoughtseize.
Magic card. No.
Yes.
Thoughtseize is terrible.
Wandering Eye.
No, the perfect magic card is Lava Spike.
Lava Spike is a great example. Okay.
It is.
But Thoughtseize is what I'm talking about.
No, it's not. Thoughtseize is terrible. You might kill yourself. The number of times people Thougeize and a clever player engineers it so that they just take damage is actually non-zero.
No,
right?
that's not what I'm talking about.
Still manage to screw up Lava Spike. Like, and I see them screw up Lava Spike over and over. If you can't get Lava Spike right in a deck of 20 Lava Spikes, the thing that you're aspiring to is not achievable.
Well, okay.
And when I said something was mathematically impossible, it's obviously not mathematically impossible. It's super unlikely.
Okay,
right?
let me try to focus on what I'm trying to say. Like, so, one thing that came up, what did you think about my comparison of Parfait, Burn, and Dreadnought being all decks that really appeal to me strategically?
I think that that makes sense to you, right? Because all 3 of those decks have sub games, and the sub game is if I achieve this, if I just turn this corner, right, and that this corner has a particular flag on it, that is either a proxy for a win for me, or I enter the next sub game and I know what to do in the next sub game.
Yeah. So this is actually great. So
those decks have those things in common. The Rock has no such sub game.
Exactly. Right? So let me tell you what I think about what you just said. What you just said is exactly what I'm saying. All 3 of those decks, I am never or very rarely unclear on what to do next, right? Like based on what's in my hand, what my opponent has, what deck my opponent is playing, it's just always clear. Like people are always like, oh, Parfait, so many decisions. You cast Enlightened Tutor and you
always for Oath.
And you can choose.
Like,
yeah. It's just like, no, you're there's 3 cards that'll win you the game right now. One of them is Oath of Druids and the other is Land Tax or Scroll Rack. And some of the time,
Land Tax.
And some of the times,
dude, you get Oath. It's really not that hard.
And sometimes it's Ivory Tower or Zera and Orbits or is waiting. But it's just like, yeah, there's like, oh.
You know which lock piece goes next.
Yeah.
It's super sequential.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that is hilarious.
Yeah, but isn't that like a perfect example of like exactly what I'm saying? It's just like,
so I think that Parfait or like Sandblack Gush Tax and like those decks are very prone to making errors, but not strategic errors.
Yeah.
The kinds of errors that you would make are just like, I forgot to use my scroll rack.
Yeah.
I forgot that there was a Sylvan library.
I grabbed one more. I grabbed one extra land
for the wrong number of cards, right? Like those are the errors you make because there's like so many stack opportunities and a lot of the stuff is literally mechanical.
Yeah.
Right? Like how many cards do I pick up? How many cards do I stack? So you're prone to error, but you're not prone to strategic errors.
Exactly. So this is and who else?
I think this is really funny.
Yeah. So who else? You name one other Magic player who is a big fan of the archetypes Parfait, Stiflenought, and Burn.
Stiflenought, Parfait, and Burn.
Well, actually, 2 other players. Well, I don't know how much. So Aaron Dix is potential. Rich Shea. Dr. Rich Shea feels exactly the same way that I do, that these are all decks that just make sense to him. So one thing that we applaud Richie on is his, ability to make extremely sharp decisions, like, in ways that many other people wouldn't consider. But like, he's still like the thing he's doing when he selects his deck and sleeves up for the game is actually still the same thing that I do, just not as sharp, right? Not as acutely, which is just putting himself in a position where he knows what to do with his opening hands. He knows what to do. And like, this is the case, like, I don't know, like you would say that's like, oh, that's like a linear deck thing. And in many senses, yeah, these three decks are linear, but there's something about like the type of Magic player that's gonna, like play Siphonaut versus the type of Magic player that's gonna play the Rock or Landstill.
So can I segue this? This is like a little after 2005. This is around 2006 that this happened, right? So 2004, 2005 is the cutoff of pre-modern, right?
Yeah.
So around 2006, I was the best deck designer in the world, right? So and I felt like there was a fight between me and R&D. And the reason that I felt like there was a fight between me and R&D is because they told me there was. Okay. So Aaron didn't like that I would come up with new decks for like the world. Yeah, Foresight for like the world championships or for whatever thing I happen to be playing in states, a PTQ that no one had ever seen before and had no bad matchups. And I did it over and over again. Right. So like I would just like, but the problem is I just didn't choose enough or as good enough bullets. So I had like a lot of people who were like, they would lose for the top 16 of the world championships instead of winning. Andre won in 2009. Right. But like, Critical Mass, Juicy Blue. I made this Wildfire deck that had no bad matchups that locked every deck out and drew infinite cards. And no one had ever seen it before the World Championships. It was loony, right? So Aaron shows me this card when I'm like there for the Pro Tour booth, which was Spell Snare. And he said, I'm trying to make cards so that other people get to play, right? And I'm like, what do you mean by that? He's just like, you solve the matchup before the tournament starts. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I do. Right. Like that's like, I love doing that. Right. Like that's where I geeked out. Right. So he's like, but it's bad for everything. Right. It's bad for coverage. The commentator doesn't understand how the deck works. I'm like, that's not my fault. Right. Like it's bad. It's like, it's not predictable. Right. So he literally was just like, I didn't realize this because I was friends with a lot of people in R&D, but maybe that was the dawn of fire design. Maybe I ruined it for myself. A year later, there was Bitter Blossom. Right. And I hate Bitter Blossom. It's my least favorite Magic card of all time. So
Lorwyn, huh?
Yeah. So the thing is that I think that this is very different from what you're saying. Right. Like I was never that interested in like getting to a sub game. I wanted to imagine all of the things that could happen and figure out a way to beat all of them. Right.
So this is something
I solved it before the tournament started.
But this is something that you might have said before, which is that you have this belief that if you are sufficiently prepared for certain combinations, like certain combinations of things, like that's like a form of Magic intellect, right? Like I've been in the situation before, type intellect.
It doesn't fit in pre-modern very well, but it historically fit in other competitive formats prior to Fire Design, probably, right? So it doesn't fit now because who goes first is so important, and like the cards just snowball. Right. Like, so you could be the best prepared person in the world. You can't beat your opponent's 2-drop, 3-drop if they have enough material and they went first.
But
yeah, this is like the Batman archetype, right? If you have sufficient information and sufficient preparation and sufficient time, right? So I used to play, I don't know what they call it, because I used to play a lot of Moto. I know that's probably surprising to you because
I know that.
So like, I just remember this one night, Aaron was watching me play, right? So I was playing a green-white mid-range deck and my opponent, and I was just like, Loxodon, like, Umezawa's Jitte, Loxodon, Hierarch, etc. Because those are the cards in 2006. I know we have the cutoff in 2004, 2005, and pre-modern, right? And then, so it looks like I'm going to lose. And then I give Sungiven for Bosiju, Life from the Loam, and I don't know, something else that like lets me get my Bosiju back with Life from the Loam, and then I hard cast Enduring Ideal with Besiju, so my opponent can't counterspell out of it, and then I proceed to lock them out with like Dovescape Form of the Dragon in my green-white mid-range deck, right? He's like, well, I did not expect that to happen. I'm like, yeah, because I figured out all the angles. I figured out if this happens, I am going to now do this thing, and it's uncounterable, right? Like, so the thing is that you can't do that in pre-modern. One of the original mistakes that I made in pre-modern was I love red-white slide, right? Like everybody knows that about me. I love red-white slide. The reason I love red-white slide is because I thought the best decks when I first started pre-modern were Landstill, Mono Red, and Elves, right? And those were those decks seemed like the best decks. We tested a bunch of Goblins was good, right? But like Landstill, Mono Red, and Elves, that was like the top of our hop, right? We tested a lot. I'm like, these are the three best decks. We actually were just going to play Mono Red because it was good against Elves and Landstill. Then one night I said, Pog, let's try this red-white deck. This deck looks terrible, right? It doesn't do anything interesting. Crushes Mono Red, crushes Elves, crushes Landstill. So I came to the conclusion that this was just the best deck. The problem was if everybody was just going to play the best decks that, did the best at the Easter Championship, did the best on paper, then red-white really would have been the best deck. But Jeff Ferris taught me a harsh lesson, which was that some Yahoos just cataclysm you. And there's no way out of it, right? So your red-white deck doesn't have any counter spells, right? So you can't do this in pre-modern because there's just too much random stuff. Like if you're playing against a deck that's just like Portent, Gush, activate this, and you've just got a Swords to Plowshares in your hand, and then all of a sudden there's a Form of the Dragon in play. You're like, oh wait, I have the wrong answer for this problem. I'm going to die to this Form of the Dragon. Right, that's the thing that can happen in pre-modern. It's way, way harder to predict. And so you just have to use a different paradigm. You can't imagine the whole format. It's impossible.
Yeah.
There's too many.
Well, I mean, I don't know, unless you're playing Parfait.
I mean, you're playing Parfait, you love your Meddling Mage 12-12 matchup.
I mean, I don't love it, but pretty
like
typically
a kid off the street who's never played before can just take you in as far as I can tell.
No, that's absolutely true. I didn't love it, but I had a plan, right? Like, so one thing that I got criticism over was like Landstill, someone was like, oh, Landstill beats Parfait. I'm like, well, not if you Burning Wish for Decree of Annihilation.
I don't think that Landstill beating Parfait was that mathematical. I mean, we had a playtest game.
It was at least close. In
the Michael J's basement playtest session where I beat your first 7 land taxes. And the 8th land tax got me. Yeah. Right? Like, just got me.
But anyway, so somebody was just like, oh, Parfait was always like weak to this. And I was like, actually, like, this is what we would do if they did this.
But
and then,
I think that
somebody messaged, like, somebody replied to that and then they were like, oh, like, this deck is totally answerable and shouldn't be banned. And then it's like, we also have a plan for every bad situation. And I was just kind of like, I'm not going to take it lying down. Like,
people don't complete games, right? So remember I said that you like these decks that have sub games, right? So they take the sub game as a proxy for a win. It's like, okay, this is now a bad matchup because I achieved the sub game. They don't realize there's the whole rest of the game to finish.
Yeah. I mean, this is actually super interesting because you brought up the red white deck. One of the most interesting things about the red white deck is like maybe the red white deck is actually really good at winning these sub games, like against Elves or Landstill or whatever. But like it might actually not play out that way because you just give your opponent time and your opponent can eventually adapt to you. Or like one time we played a testing game where I'm like, I cast Armageddon against Landstill. I was playing Parfait. I cast Armageddon against Landstill and I was like, this was actually a sweet moment because I'm playing against Jordan. We're at David's. You're watching, right? Like I draw the card for the turn and it's Armageddon and I have like a Mox Diamond and 3 lands in play and opponent just has like 4 lands in play. And I'm just like, well, he's tapped out, so I'm going to get this Armageddon in. But also, I'm not getting that much value out of my Armageddon. He could just like play lands and like
but you can win it. You can win at low resource. It's way harder for him to win at low resource.
Right, but I didn't even cash that many lands. So we were like, Jordan was just like, okay, and then he put his lands in his graveyard, and then we played like another like a million turns of Magic until I got tired, and we didn't like figure out a winner of that game. I was just like, okay, I'm bored now. So
let me try to like bring it back for a sec. I think that the people who think that Elves is winnable from the red-white side just haven't played against good enough red-white opponents, right? Like red-white's really good at closing games. And on the other hand, I think that when you play the Rock against elves, and the Rock achieves the sub game of summoning Engineered Plague and clears the elves side, that people have the wrong idea about this game because elves is going to win this game, right? And people think that the Rock wins because they've achieved the sub game, right? So that's the reverse.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I think it's like I mean, it's an interesting like view. I would say that like when I was referring to, I mean, you can always evaluate in this, but I was like referring to burn. I think what's like nice about, burn is just that like, okay, like, I don't know that it just makes sense to me in a way that
I watched a ton of games. Like Pog was playing some, or like Aaron or Aaron's friends were playing. So I watched a ton of games at LobsterCon where one player was Landstill and one player was burn. And then the Landstill player got the card Circle of Protection red in play in a sideboarding game. And I watched and I would just chuckle to myself. And I'm just like, the burn player would just like slog through a few turns before eventually conceding. And I was just like, I would have won this game.
Of course. Yeah.
Right. Like but that's actually was really easy.
That's actually one of the interesting things though, because that's like a pretty good example of like, I don't know. It's like once the cop red is in play, right? It's just like, it becomes very clear what you need to do from the burn side. It's just like, well, like, I'm just going to do exactly this. Like these decks like are so good at adapting to a script. And it was so interesting because I was playing obviously the Miracle Gro Menguchi Teamer Dryad deck in Modern, and I just punted. I mean, obviously, like Modern, like whatever.
It's
I don't
a complicated deck.
Yeah, it's complicated.
A lot of snowballing.
But the one thing that was like, I mean, but it was just like so simple, like where I was just like, okay, like, the range of things that could happen to me are too large, right? So like, one example was I'm like, oh, I tap down mana when I should like hold up a counterspell, right? So like this like decision, pretty classic decision, but it's like, one of those things where it's like, okay, well, do I want to develop my board? Like, what's the biggest punish that my opponent can have? And like, or like I countered the wrong thing. My opponent straight up did the Michael J to me where I countered the bait spell on end step. And like, I just did it.
Then the next 3 spells resolved.
No, the next 1 spell. So my opponent end stepped Orcish Bowmasters. I'm like, okay. Like, I don't know. Maybe I had a Ledger Shredder. Maybe I had like a Preordain in hand. I was like, okay, I don't want this Orcish Bowmasters to resolve. And then my opponent, but I had like 1 mana up, and I had a Spell Pierce in my hand.
Yeah.
So I had seen the One Ring from my opponent's deck. My opponent's deck is playing Yawgmoth. I don't know if Yawgmoth plays the One Ring. So I was like, well, if I counter,
every deck can play the
every deck can play One Ring. So I'm like, okay, I'm covered on this Bowmasters. I don't want it on the battlefield. I didn't have a burn spell. Like, I had a burn spell for Michael J. I just refused to use it on your end step. Once again, tapping mana on my opponent's turn would have been so much better than tapping mana on my end step. But apparently this is a heuristic you can't follow. Anyways, I guess I have to explain that one to the listeners after. But anyways, I countered the Bowmasters. I'm like, okay, I'm covered on the One Ring, but they untapped and they played Yawgmoth. And like, I didn't have, a 1 mana counterspell for Yawgmoth. And I don't even know if it was a mistake. Like, and then there was like another thing where I'm like, okay, I'm at 1 life. My opponent's on 0 cards. Like, one of the things I'm dead to is Bowmasters, but I don't have a Bowmasters open anyway. So I'd rather end this game sooner and tap out. And like, my opponent might not run a Bowmasters into open mana.
You have to pick an axis.
Yeah, right? But like, here's the thing: is like,
the thing you were saying before, like you had no sub game to achieve.
Yeah, I was like, I have no idea what to do. Well, no, so I did actually do what I do, which is like I default to the most aggressive play possible. I'm like, okay, well, I'm dead to a few ranges, so the best thing that I can do is reduce the number of draw steps my opponents have, and that tends to be what I do. And I don't spend enough time.
That's not a bad. It's
not a bad way
about it, unless you're a parfait player.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Parfait player sounds like a terrible way to play.
But it became, I don't know, like obviously this was like a post, like whatever. I knew all the information, so like. It was like so sad where I was just like, well, my Bauble draw can draw me a counterspell that's 1 mana that answers Bowmasters. My only 1 mana counterspell is Spell Snare, but that was the card that I would have drawn off Bauble if I kept mana open. Anyways.
So let me pause you for a second. Patrick Chapin, who was the first ever R&D intern, right? And Eric Lauer, the arguably the greatest deck designer of all time, who is the lead developer at R&D. Although I don't know if you ever see his work anymore as they manifest into Magic cards in 2023. Once explained to me an interview question about how to get into R&D. This is back when they were hiring people who were the caliber of Patrick Chapin versus I don't know who they're hiring now. And they're
hiring Abe Corrigan. Shout out.
Yeah, they are hiring Abe Corrigan. So he's not going to be playing pre-modern next to us on Friday nights anymore.
No, that's the only format. Because he's going to be in Seattle.
Yeah,
but he is allowed to play pre-modern. He's not allowed to play anything else.
So this question, I actually would have gotten it wrong, right? But it changed how I think about things. And the way they're trying to do is figure out if they could hire for somebody who had a really expansive way of thinking, right? So the question, and so Eric is a graduate background in mathematics, just so you know, right? So I think he might have his doctorate in mathematics. And the question is about like, describe the biggest number, right? And so I said something snide, like I would just describe the number 8 and then I would knock it down on its side, right? Like that was the biggest number, right? So Chapin described how he described the biggest number on the way to getting into
his internship. Yeah.
So there's these towers of servers, right? Like they're a real thing, right? And like maybe there's like 128 servers in these towers at the time, right? And that like, so there's 100 of these, and then you have 128 of those stacked into the server. And then you have those, and then they're just all next to each other. And like each one of these servers can hold this much information, right? And he's just lavishly talking about how many of these server towers that there are and how many bytes they can describe in ways that are like, it's not infinity, right? But of like, what is the limit of how much a human can describe? Like how big a number is that a human can describe? So it's really changed the way that I think about how you would describe things, or more like expansively how you can imagine things, right? And so it's really interesting to me, like the way that you've described some of these game situations, which is that, and also I think it is similar to how I would approach my opponent casting a Circle of Protection. I'm sorry, Circle of Protection red if I'm playing red deck, right? And like what resources I have, because it challenges you to imagine the situation of like how you're going to encompass these things where you are on the wrong side of the resources, right? But you still have to find a path to victory. And that like, if you have a big enough imagination, you can imagine, the nooks and crannies that you can fit through in order to get there. But if you don't, like, you end up having really non-specific strategy, which I think is the thing that you are saying, oh, I have a really non-specific strategy. Just my general heuristic is X, right? Versus if you have to beat a circle, just like, okay, what are the limitations of the situation, right? My opponent has a certain number of lands.
Yeah.
How many of those lands are flooded strands, right? How many cards do I have in hand? How many cards do I actually have to get through in order to beat the circle, right? If they land a circle with 40 life, it's going to be pretty hard to win.
Yeah,
right.
If
they have a circle with 10 life.
Yeah. And if you have some creatures in play, some pops,
interesting, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, I don't know. It's what keeps me up at night right now. It's just like trying to understand, it really bothered me, honestly. Like I was so unnerved by cause it's happened to me before. It happens to me a lot playing Replenish, funnily enough. Where and obviously you saw that live when I was playing Replenish against Riche, where like I just literally could not come up with a plan. Like I couldn't come up with a sequence. I literally could. I mean, I know it's astounding to you, but to me, it was like,
is about 4 things. The first one is land management, right? How do I accomplish whatever the next 3 things are that I have to do without blowing up my city of traders?
Yeah, right.
That's one. Like one is land management, right? So the questions I would ask myself are, is my opponent a counterspell deck, and am I under a clock? Right. Those are the next 2 things. There's only 4 things.
Well, okay. So let me just stop you right there. Yeah. I don't struggle with those moments where it's very clear, right? So what you're describing is like pretty simple. Like if I know my opponent's deck has counterspells, then they have reverse Circle of Protection, right? they have X lands and X cards in hand. So we can play the same game that burn does, where it's like, well, circle versus burn is just like, I need 7 mana for 7 burn spells, right? So similarly, I need 7 test spells for 7 counter spells, right? So
any of them get through, you get them, right?
Exactly. Right. Yeah. That's the idea. So I don't struggle with playing replenish against counterspell decks. In fact, I think that I'm quite good at playing replenish against counterspell decks, like at large. Like, I think that I have a pretty decent rate against land still. And then, you know, of course, Sam Black's a much better player than some of my counterspell based opponents, you know, where he feels confident that he would never lose to me with a counterspell deck against my replenish deck. But yeah, earlier today, I beat Stasis with replenish.
Yeah, I feel like I beat those kind of decks with replenish all the time when I was playing it a lot last year, and I don't think I should have.
Right.
Like, it's just, maybe that's what Ev from Vancouver is saying, because like, I mean, yeah, I figure out how to get there, right? Usually the paradigm is using your life as a resource, right? So this is a mistake that you make. You go so fast, which is one of the advantages you have. You are so much more aggressive on average than I am. It gives you an edge against people who don't have their defenses up yet. And then you take your foot off the accelerator. All of a sudden, Mr. Intuition for 3 deep analysis is scared to close the freaking deal. Right? You're going to go that fast? You have to risk slamming against the wall at 100 miles an hour, because if you don't, they're the one that gets splattered. Yeah. But you do it over and over again. You get like 97% of the way there. You're like, ugh, I need to pick my foot up off the accelerator. I was going too fast.
Well, no, I mean, that's
finish it. You're going to end up losing because you gave him a window.
Right. I mean, it's like, obviously it's more complicated than that, because those deep analysis actually kill you, like, basically, right?
Faster than your opponent's deck.
Yeah. Because you actually tap your Ancient Tomb for those every turn. And you also Frantic Search, which is minus 4 life. So basically I got into a position where I was like, okay, so that specific turn, right? I literally was like, if I deep analysis here, because I didn't have my land drop, if I deep analysis like for my land drop, like I will, like I'm going to take 5 damage and then like pitch a card to clean up or whatever. It was like, I'm going to avoid tapping Ancient Tomb for like deep analysis until I have a sequence in my mind where like I'm at 7 life and I tap Ancient Tomb 3 times over two turns or whatever. But anyways, it's so interesting, because like these moments for me are like, I don't even actually know how to improve. I mean, obviously I should do the obvious thing, which is like record myself playing and like actually break down these moments and like figure out if I can understand like a line through, or figure out if I make a mistake. Because one of the things is that I've slowed down. I'm pretty fast with decks that I'm very comfortable with, obviously, but I've slowed down a lot as a player. So playing this Menguchi deck, I had like, you know, very little time left on the clock, on my Magic clock, Magic Online clock, at very many of these points. And I actually like didn't stop myself to like build my decisions, just because I felt like I actually was slow playing, right? So if it was a paper game, I would get to a point where I'm like, I've thought about this enough. I don't know what to do next. So I'm just going to do this. Like, I'm just going to tap my mana. Like, I'm just going to like put a creature on the table and not leave up a counter spell, because I don't know what I'm trying to counter, and like, whatever. Like, granted, I always leave up a counter spell if my opponent has 0 cards in hand and I have counter spell. Right. But like, but yeah, like so often, or not so often, but like, it frustrates me to no end, actually putting myself in positions with certain decks where like I don't know what I did wrong. I don't know how to choose the right thing to do. I'll give you
some serenity. Okay. I can give you some serenity right here. Okay. Which heuristic is right? Fortune favors the bold, or fools rush in?
Well,
yeah, they're both right sometimes. Okay, so
I'll tell you which one I use.
It's really hard to know in the moment, right?
Yeah.
So I can just tell you, I've had the fortune of being able to learn from and play with literally the greatest players of all time, right? And Bob Maher is so tentative in closing out a game compared to John Finkel, right? John Finkel would rather end the game in a draw than give his opponent the opportunity to maybe win, right? He's just pedal to the floor if he sees an open, right? And so a lot of the stuff that I've kind of internalized, which is that like suboptimal play is often correlated with giving your opponent too much time, comes from John. And John would just be like, did you see what I did there? Did you see what I did there? Right? Like, it would have been better to this. The game was close, but I ended up winning, and this is why, right? Bob is like, I think that you would love how Bob plays, right? Like, Bob builds a layer of armor with every draw step, and his likelihood of winning becomes ever more certain with every second that goes by, right? He builds to a pinnacle of absolute certainty, and he takes his time picking his opponent apart and really enjoying the delicious flavor of the body parts that he's chewing on the way down to that 20. And he thinks like, look, if I have a slight advantage and I can protect the queen, why should I extend? Like, that's really how Bob thinks about it, right? And like, I shouldn't extend. I'm going to win this game, right? I'm going to put the onus on my opponent to draw out of this. They're very different from each other. But I can tell you this. If they're under pressure, I bet both of them end up conforming to the same play patterns because they're good, right?
Right.
But all of us have default
tendencies.
Settings. Yeah.
I mean, I that's actually, I think I need to, the thing that I'm talking about, I think, is I need to build better intuition for just choosing, like if I can't discern between two lines, let's just use this paradigm of a more aggressive or more conservative line. I need to get better at, I mean, I guess exactly what you said, which is just committing to a more aggressive or more conservative line rather than doing a blended approach where, like, this is pretty classic, right? Where you're just like, okay, I mean, there's so many. So I am proud of myself and also embarrassed at my, so I'm proud because this is an example of which I did this correctly. So my game against Jared Doucette, I have the game completely locked up, right? He has a bunch of goblins in play. I have Shard Phoenix and I have Ancestors Chosen, right? And I'm attacking Jared for 2 every turn. And at some point, I can give Jared 1 less draw step, not that it matters, and I can pop my Shard Phoenix and I can attack for 4. But instead, I'm like, well, Jared can play Pyrokinesis out of his sideboard. It's open deck list, right? I was like,
it's not going to happen.
I was like, well, I had duressed him too. So it's like all the information is there. Man. And I'm like, well, he's got a red card in his hand. He's got no lands in play. And I'm like, what if he draws Pyrokinesis? Cause he just like envisioned exactly this happening and like resets the board. Anyways,
discuss this. I will say something to you. Okay.
So I continued just attacking for 2 until the game was over. And I could have sped up the clock by like 3 turns if I just like sacrificed Phoenix right away and then just like attacked with.
I mean, was there any realistic way out for him?
There's so many weird ones because I had Phoenix. He had like Siege Gang Commander. So one thing was like,
is this the game that your Chroma was in the sideboard?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know, man. This is disgusting.
I hardcast. It's true. But I hardcast both my Oath creatures, and I like Armageddon to keep him off the mana to like activate Siege Gang. Yeah, that's the whole thing.
This is like, people bring this up to me all the time, just like, hey, did you write this article when? I'm like, yes, you obviously know that I wrote this article, right? Like, you were referencing the specifics of it, right? And they're like, yeah, that was interesting. And I'm like, I told Bob this game once where I was so proud of how I played. And Bob pointed out to me that I had made a misread on turn 2 and that the game didn't have to be that hard. Like I played.
Is this the Aquamoeba game? Because I love. I
played
love this.
Such good resource management to just perfectly get it.
Let me. Do you remember the name of the article?
I believe it's called "Realizing How Bad You Are."
Yeah, I think that sounds
from like 2000.
Yep, 2004, right? January 30th, 2004. Oh man, so, you did this on Ancestral Recall too.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you did.
So I was so what I'm going to get to is like, I think that the skill that you should develop as I used to work on this personally, right, the skill you should develop is reading your opponent. Because if you knew what was actually in your opponent's hand, you would just make the better play more often, right? So you can actually practice this. And so I'm going to
this is like a this is a exercise, right? So you can just force yourself to stop every certain step or every time you cast a card or every draw step and just think to yourself, what does my opponent
what does my opponent have and what are they trying to represent, right? Yeah. So the thing is, like, I had this matchup I was really, really proud of where I was playing with Pog and Itai, right? And Itai comes in and he's just like, well, everybody knows that blue-red Murktide beats Burn. And I'm just like, no way. Like, I bet I beat you 80% of the time in game one, right? And then I proceeded to do so in playtest, right? So
with no deflecting palms. It's crazy.
It's super easy, right? And so then Pog's like, let me try, right? And then I'm just constantly correcting Pog's play. I'm like, okay, you're playing into this, you're playing into this. What you have to do is get him into the situation so you can land all these spells, right? Which is the thing. And so one of the things that I stopped him from doing was attacking with a Goblin Guide. I was just like, don't attack with this Goblin Guide. And it's why? And he's just like, what do you think is going to happen if you attack with this Goblin Guide, right? I didn't realize it until this conversation, just really good at reading. And so the reason to bring this up is because right now I'm doing a project where Rebel-san, the commander influencer, I'm coaching her, right? And so she sent me a bunch of VODs of her playing Burn. And one of them, she just sits there and thinks about this Goblin Guide on turn one and is hyper tentative about it and like super like thoughtful. And I'm like, this is the exact situation that I was in with Itai and Pog, where I told Pog not to.
I love this. Right? So right? For the listeners, your blue-red opponent has a deck that at the time actually contained instant speed blue spells. Some of which include Spell Pierce. And I said blue spells, and then some instant speed red spells. In Modern, for those of you who don't know, there's a land that comes into play untapped on turn one.
Spirebluff Canal.
That produces both blue and red. And there's a land that comes in play tapped that your opponent plays 100 copies of via fetch lands called Steam Vents.
Yeah.
It comes into play tapped because your opponent is playing Burn.
Yeah.
So for the listeners, what does your opponent playing the untapped land on turn one instead of the tapped land most likely tell you?
Well, that they have they're on the play, right? So it could mean a lot of things. But my point being is that Rebel ultimately doesn't play the Goblin Guide or attack. They did this, and this. So I think that this, and I just realized I was just like, I would have been in with the Goblin Guide.
Come on.
And it would have hit, right? Like, that's the thing. I'm like, and it would have hit. I just realized, like, I just know what my opponent has, right? Like,
oh my God.
So that is the skill you have to develop.
You wrote like 300 words about not running the Goblin Guide into open mana.
But there was no unholy heat. That's the thing that I'm trying to get at. I knew my opponent didn't have an unholy heat. I was just watching a VOD. I'm like, this Goblin Guide is in. Right? Like, slam it. Right? Like,
I'm gonna have to see this. This is not actionable advice, Mike. Like, you can't tell
I
people.
Just gave you actionable advice. Learn how to read your opponents.
What?
Like,
their
opponent like did all this cantripy shit, right? Just like, it's like, oh, they did all this cantripy shit. That means that they have the answer.
I thought it was
like, no. They did all this cantripy shit. It means they're looking for the.
Okay. You said it was turn one though.
It was turn one. They had like, I don't know, like the 0 casting cost artifact that draws a card.
So they go bobble self. I
think like
canal.
2 baubles.
Double bobble self canal, and your read is there's no shot to have the bolt.
I'm in. So the reason that I would have done it is because like that guy just sat there for a long time, and I'm just like, we can do a jam game, right? So I think Rebel ended up being stuck on 2 lands. So like what ends up happening is that like, if you don't deploy your mana, you get to a situation in the mid game, which is what happened, where they can start answering your spells 1 for 1, even though you have a natural mana advantage.
Yeah.
And so like, it's okay to lose the Goblin Guide here because you just can't exploit the natural advantage of your deck if the opponent can answer you 1 for 1. You need to actually deploy stuff and force them to have interaction. So like, I think the guide would have gotten in. There's no way to know because the guide didn't deploy.
this is,
but like, it was actually the things that would have happened later that justify the play.
I agree with you. And I think this is true. And I think it's interesting. But I also think that it's not actionable advice because what you're talking about is intuition. Like you can explain it. You can be like, well, my opponent went double bobble, so they just don't have the bolt. And you actually don't know that they didn't.
I wrote about this in the official Miser's guide where I was just like, I need to win this round in order to make nationals this year. Right. So I'm playing a deck with Spreading Seas, which I guess is getting reprinted in the new set. So what I did for a week before the regional championships was imagine I was playing against Jund for the top 8, and I just kept dealing myself hands that had 3 Spreading Seas. So I would just stack my deck, and I just look at my hand like there's 3 Spreading Seas, and I just do it over and over and over again. So I'm playing my top 8. If I win this match, I'm gonna make the top 8. So I deal out my hand, and I knew my opponent was Jund. How many Spreading Seas were in my hand, Lanny?
What? Sure.
I just did it for a week.
Okay.
Just dealt myself 3 Spreading Seas hands. And I'm just like, I'm going to be in the situation where I'm going to be playing.
This is another example
Jund.
of non-actual advice.
I did it. I literally did it for a week. I just dealt myself 3 Spreading Seas hands over and over and over again. Right. This is the kind of thing that I do to prepare for tournaments. Right. So
I agree that a very effective tool for playtesting is to put cards in your hand against your playtesting partner, right? To see if they matter, right? Just start with having drawn your sideboard card in your opener. You're just like, okay, like Leyline of the Void is important in the matchup. Should I play 4 or 1 or 2 or 3? It's like, let's just start every game with Leyline.
How many games do you win if you draw these cards?
Exactly. It's just like if you're playing a deck that gets hosed by Leyline of the Void, you're just like, okay, well, I'm just going to deal myself Nature's Claim. Like how many times, like, do I win if I have the Nature's Claim? Anyways, so the reason why
to do that and also give himself Rainbow City of Brass so that he can like cast
nice
for
perfect.
no penalty.
I mean, I would at least take a mulligan and then put the card
Rainbow
back.
City of Brass.
Anyways, City of Blast is rainbow. Anyways, the reason why
painless City of Brass.
The reason why I think this is not actionable advice, and I think it's just like very, very difficult, is that like pretty often people will put together these like what's the plays, and this actually loops back into my like people don't actually know why they do anything. Like people will put together these like what's the plays, and I love like there's no check mark what's the plays are boring, right? Because it's just like I have the win, what's the play, right? And you're just like, okay, well, just there's only one way to win from this spot, so do this. But a good example of what's the play is like the Pablo Suarez, like what's the play from Elves, right? I've got these cards in hand. I have Survival of the Fittest in hand.
I've got like whatever. Expect that sharpshooter to come down and clean the board.
Oh yeah, I mean there's stuff like that too. That's an aside.
Sweet.
But I think it's very difficult to teach somebody these like hyper complex what's the play situations because one, they're too like they're too hard to learn from. Maybe like one is just like, okay, well, like your example is like, well, your opponent crack the baubles, right? Or they bobble themselves and then they played a non-fetch instead of a fetch, right? Or like whatever. Like these are all bits and pieces of information. And yeah, you can like break it down. You can be like, okay, if my opponent bobbles themselves and they don't fetch, that means they like the top card of their library, right? They probably like a bolt against a Goblin Guide. Like,
but they don't know that. So it was game 1 on the play. They didn't know that Rebel was on burn.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the other thing.
So that's the other thing. So then your opponent's keep range is different. And then, so like I don't know, like it just seems so difficult to me to like pass on this knowledge to another person of just being like, hey, so like you just gotta have the read here.
Here's
and
something
like
that is actionable, right? What if you could develop sub games, right? That were like, if I do this and this, then I'm now in a different game. Right. So you keep saying that you don't know what to do in certain situations, but maybe you just don't have a wide enough range of imaginable sub games. Right. So I could tell you, like, if I look at my opening hand, I'm just like, all right, well, my current sub game is this. And if I do this twice, that means that the math on the game becomes this. And my opponent has to have this interplay. And since they don't know what my sub game is necessarily, then they're probably just going to lose. Right? Like that's
well, okay. So let me actually narrow down what I was saying about myself. So I think actually what I'm bad at is determining my equity in a certain play, right? So the most common mistake the most common, I guess, learnable mistake is, and I think Rebels actually tweeted about this, is just like, I don't know, something about playing around something, right? So like you have a play that gets punished by your opponent having one thing, right? And let's not include top decks, but like obviously top decks play a role. But like you've got play A, which is punished if your opponent has this, and you have play B, which is punished if your opponent has this. And like those things just start off 50-50, right? Like they can have one or another. And then you've got to be like, okay, well, like then you have to multiply it, right? Where it's like, okay, if I get punished, what am I in? What puts me in a better position?
Realized something. Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
Right. I play in my head like there's an additional token in every game of Magic called the initiative, right? So is that actually a thing that white plumes or something get?
Yeah. We'll call it advantage bar.
I have been playing this way for decades, right? Before there was an actual thing called the initiative.
Yes. Well, there was in D&D, but yes.
Yeah. So there's a thing in like Who's the Beatdown. And so my goal in life is to seize the initiative as quickly as possible and then force my opponent to take the initiative. Right. So this happens a lot in limited, right? So like I have the initiative and then my opponent plays a bigger creature and I no longer have the initiative, right? My opponent removes my creature and plays a bomb rare. They have the initiative, right? Yeah. So one of the reasons why I would make the Goblin Guide play is if it works, I get the initiative and my opponent now has to deal with me having the initiative before playing their game. And if they start playing their game and I still have the initiative, they're going to lose. No one can beat Burn if Burn retains the initiative starting on you.
Right. But this is why it's okay. So
now, secondly, if I make this play and they kill my creature, it doesn't mean I've lost the initiative. Just nobody has the initiative. But like the opportunity for me to have the initiative is really, really valuable here because now my opponent might have to use multiple cards in order to get the initiative. And like if my backup play is Eidolon of the Great Revel, I'm just going to get the initiative right back.
Right. But that's if you have, that's obviously considering what's in your hand. But like the reason why in 3 years you said it was so obvious that your opponent has a burn spell here because they ran out a Spirebluff Canal. Like that's all about a game that Burn can play, which isn't about initiative, isn't about tempo. It's just about using your cards efficiently and ensuring that a Goblin Guide gets in for 2 damage because eventually they're going to put themselves in a position where the Goblin Guide gets in.
In that game, what ended up happening is we floated a Rift Bolt instead, right? Which was like a proxy for the initiative. We started doing test spells every turn, and then they actually had to take action because we can beat them outside of the red zone. They can't beat us outside of the red zone. Exactly. At some point, they have to pay like 2 or more mana to put a creature in play, and that is our signal to unload our grip. Yeah. Right. Including a Goblin Guide that eventually got in.
Exactly. So
right. So
that's why that I respond to that much more because that's like a pretty that's something that you can measure, right? You can look at your hand and you can be like one, if you don't have a choice, there's 2 things going on here. One is just the bloodthirsty play, which is just that if this Goblin Guide gets in, you are winning, right? So even if there's a range where it gets bolted, the range of it not getting bolted has such a huge payoff that like, you're just going to snowball this in a win. Like, I was watching Mengu play his deck. And he said the sentence, which I couldn't believe. And I realized that is true. Burn actually can't answer a turn 1 Ragavan on the draw.
Sure it can.
It can, but with just Lightning Bolt. There's literally no other card in the deck. or a blocker. Yeah, but a blocker is bad, right?
Blocker sucks. Blocker sucks. The whole. There's the whole thing. I wrote an article about this. Blocker sucks. You bolt it.
Yeah. Of course you bolt it. But that's the thing. Is like if you don't have the bolt, it is.
No, it's not good.
It's so bad because you don't have any other card. Because unlike pre-modern Burn, modern Burn just has Bolt for 1 mana. Pre-modern Burn has Bolt Shock and Seal Fire or Firebolt.
There's grades of how bad this is, right? You could float a Rift Bolt and probably kill it the next turn, right?
But of course.
It sucks.
But it could also tag a Lightning Helix and then it's over.
That's really bad. Anyways, don't get me wrong. Anyway, you should win the roll.
So the point, try to win.
But I haven't started losing to Ragavan deck, so I don't know what to tell you.
No. Of course not. The rest of the time your deck is so stacked against theirs, anyways. Like they literally have to catch that Lightning Helix with a Ragavan, or else it's bad news. But anyways, like that was a funny aside. My main point was just that like conceptualizing. I love the reason why I love the 3 gears, like the listeners should know, like I love the 3 gears. Like I wrote an article about the 3 gears after the 3, like from a preview version of the 3 gears. So like I'm obsessed with this article. And one of the things that I'm obsessed with is one, the original Philosophy of Fire article does not actually explain Philosophy of Fire that well. The original Philosophy of Fire article is like, if I have Rorik's Blade Wing and Pulse of the Forge, I'll deal 20 of damage to my opponent with 2 cards. And it's just like, what does that have to do with like
Hopefully I'm a better writer than I was 20 years ago.
Classic Michael J. This is like seminal article, but 3 gears explains this implicitly, which is just that like, okay, like I can play this Goblin Guide now and my opponent can trade like card for Goblin Guide. Or if I play it later, when my opponent can't trade with it, then it gets +2 damage and my opponent's removal spell later on down the line, right? This is just like a fundamental burn thinking thing. And players who play their spells on curve, are not going to get this. Like players who always run out Goblin Guide, like whatever, or I don't know, don't bolt the Row again. Like all these things, like all of it still boils down to like Burn is the only deck that gets to say like, I'm going to draw 1 card per turn. So, 7 + X spells cards this game. Like my opponent has 20 life, like it just is, it's easy. Like what if they have 1 counterspell, 2 counterspell? What if they have Omnath? What if they have, Lightning Helix, like whatever, like you just get to reduce all of your calculation to being like, okay, like, how much damage? I mean, this applies to pre-modern. How much damage is this Mog Fanatic going to deal? How much damage is this Jackal-Pup going to deal? Like, do I need to it makes your life really easy because you're just like, okay, like, can I convert my cards for damage? I don't think
it makes your life easy. I think that it just gives you a different paradigm for playing that is different and above and beyond what other decks.
But it gives you a
different tool set.
It gives you,
it's just like everybody has a pencil and a ruler, but you have a pencil, a ruler, and a like one of the, you probably know this. There's like a famous weightlifter or whatever that's just like no, like it doesn't matter. Like 100 pounds is 100 pounds, right? The weight of the weight is like never changes. It's pure. It's like nothing. Like there's no debate, right? So what I love about burn puzzles is just that like you can just say it's like, okay, well this line deals 4 damage. It's like this line deals 5 damage, and obviously it gets complex. Like it's this line deals a potential like 7 damage over 3 turns, and only if like whatever. But you get to use this. You get to use this weight. You get to decide on the weight of your plays. The equity of your plays can be measured in your opponent's life total, and no other deck gets to do that. Like other decks have to be like, oh, after I make this sequence of plays, I'll have the initiative, or I'll be up a card, or I'll be up half a card, or I'll get an attack in. But maybe that attack doesn't matter because I don't have any reach in my deck, and like I can get an attack in, but my opponent takes over the game, or I play another creature and they wrath, like whatever. Like every other deck has to solve these puzzles in a way that isn't pure, whereas Burn gets to solve the puzzles. Like, okay, well, like why don't you play Goblin Guide on turn 1 against Spirebluff Canal? It's like because that Goblin Guide will do 0 damage, and it can do, and they might draw a card.
Yeah, that too. Well, I mean that's just the insane upside. But yeah, that's what I love about that passage in Finding the 3 Gears, and that is why I'm just like tilted off the planet that you're told Rebel the opposite play.
He just was right in that situation, right? So I think it was right. Like, I don't know. I've had to go back and I might not even be remembering this right, but I just remember watching the VOD and I was just like, my guide would be it. Yeah. All this deliberation you're doing, I'm so proud of you because I know that you had read Finding 3 Gears because you're doing all this deliberation. But
you're just like I'm attacking
right now, right? Like all of the things that you make it seem like they have an answer makes me believe they don't have an answer.
Yeah. I mean, for what it's worth, that's what I'm saying. It's like you can't teach intuition. I mean, I like the attack play because it's a different heuristic. It's a heuristic about taking a risk with a huge reward. Like.
So, yeah, I feel like in a lot of these matchups, the opponents have better cards than you, right? Like they can make 3 rhinos for 0 mana or whatever, right? Like that sucks.
Yeah.
It's 1,000 damage, right? And you're like, what would you pay for that? Nothing. Idiot. Who's pays mana for their cards? Dum. So, and I also have a 2/2. So like,
I mean, yeah, the paradigm has changed, right? Because they can just solitude. Like,
yeah. So the thing is like, but the advantage that Burn has is like once you start getting hit by like, you get hit by a Monastery Swiftspear the second time, you look at your life so just it doesn't feel like 17 anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's like, how bad can this be? And like, so you're just like, oh, I have a Lorien revealed. Like I have an Orcish Bowmasters. It's just like they are just champing at the bit to make you take 3 and then take 5.
Yeah, I mean that's why like shocking and esteem events is just like what the other thing that I love is playing against burn in modern, but same goes for pre-modern because you get to play the burn game from the burn side and like understand how to convert you're doing the opposite thing. So if your opponent runs out the Goblin Guide or the Jackal Pup or whatever, the Ball Lightning, right? Like your opponent runs Ball Lightning into your open mana and you like ice that Ball Lightning, right? Like, you're just never tapping out for the rest of the game as long as you have ice in your hand and your opponent has three lands, right? So I don't know. These are like things that these feel like learnable, right? It's like the burn is like pretty easy to download because you can teach. Burn can be taught. The Rock cannot be taught.
I'm just thinking like John had such a good mental game, right? Like John's intuition was insane. I'm like trying to, like, I think that it's wrong to say that you can't develop intuition.
Well, you can't teach it.
Why?
Because the thing that you need to do.
I read a whole book about how to become psychic this year. And I mean, psychic is in quotes here. It's like a science book, right? It's not like it's not like we're moving objects with our minds. It's just because, like, I meditate every day. Just be like visualize the outcomes that you want, right? Like if you're not going to control the universe, somebody else is. Like that's the way that it works.
So intuition is very difficult to explain, and you also can't explain how you learned it. You can't explain where it came from. That's that's the whole definition of intuition, right? Like you look at, you wrote an article about how John literally couldn't teach you how to be good at Magic. Like he was going to watch you play.
Above me.
Yeah.
I think like one of the reasons why, if I were going to be a Magic coach, I think I would become a good Magic coach because
you're not that much better than
No, I'm not that much better than the people who would pay for coaching. Right. But I'm like wildly more successful than they are. But I'm not like at too much of a different tier, right? So if you got Nathan Stoyer to try to explain this stuff to you, he's on a different planet, right? Like he's like not in this solar system. She's like, well, all you would do is win 5 Pro Tours in a row.
Yeah. And Stoyer doesn't get mixed up in what's the play discourse on Twitter. It's like only the washed and like the middle tier people getting in the what's the play discourse.
His whole shtick is just like, okay, well, I'm going to play for this card that's in nobody else's deck. And then I'm going to cast it twice. Okay. Like that's not achievable for people who don't have that card. He has a Singleton Fireball in his black-red Planeswalker deck that he's going to cast twice, right? That's his game plan for winning the Pro Tour. By the way, he did it repeatedly, okay? But how do you teach that to somebody who doesn't have the Handshake Rakdos deck? Like, as an example, right? He literally drew in the first 3 rounds of the tournament because he knew that he and his opponent, his teammate, were both just going to make the top 8. Like, these are not plays that you could teach somebody who's like, I would like to win a 32-person store tournament so that maybe I can take a stepping stone to the Pro Tour.
Yeah.
Like, you're just too far out, right? You can teach them things like you gave up points. Like, so I looked at your VOD. It was like you gave up a point here, here, and here. The difference between you and Owen Turtenwald is that Owen Turtenwald doesn't miss these points, and he's good enough to win a Pro Tour.
Yeah.
You just do this enough, you win one extra round per tournament. You imagine you win one extra round per tournament, what your average win rate is at the local level. Okay, now we can start talking about a bigger level than this. But right now, you are missing too many points. You are interpreting that as your opponent's getting lucky. The correct way to interpret this is your opponent should not have had the opportunity to top deck you.
Did you check out the MTG GPT that Keeney made?
I don't. Is that? Oh, he made a chat bot.
He whatever programmed a GPT to do magic.
I don't even have time to play pre-modern, which is
I know it's a shame. So I asked it who are the best burn players of all time.
Who did it say?
I'll pull it up. I'll ask it right now. Who are the best burn players of all the time?
ChatGPT knows who the best magic writer is.
One. That's true.
So
Yeah, you have used normal ChatGPT to
knows.
ask magic questions. You're just like, oh, I don't have time for this. I have asked GPT, regular GPT.
I showed you all those prompts.
You did,
One day. I'm like,
ChatGPT.
ChatGPT knows Mike Flores. MTG GPT has is a little off on you.
The thing that's annoyed me about ChatGPT is that, like, I'm like, what are the 5 best magic articles of all time? It has a good list and then attributes some of them to Reed Duke.
Yeah.
That one I cannot forgive ChatGPT for. Reed Duke and Sam Black didn't write those articles.
Yeah, classic stuff. I mean, the classic Michael J. getting. I mean, I do love Reed Duke's article, "Who's the Beatdown?" That's like one of the best articles ever written. Number one.
Also, apparently, has written some seminal bangers.
Number one, Reed Duke, burn player. A highly skilled player known for his success across multiple formats, including burn decks. So there you go.
I don't know if Reed's ever played a burn deck.
Number 2, Paulo Vitor Damarosa.
I think he actually won a world championship with a burn deck.
He won a world championship with a
white deck.
No. Okay. So
he top 8'd with a burn deck.
He top 8'd.
He lost to John Finkel and nobody cared. That's the thing that was insane, because like if they had played at Pro Tour Dark Ascension, everyone would have been like, oh, this is the battle for GOAT. John like 3-0'd him in the top 8 in Milwaukee and no one even mentioned it. But he had a burn deck.
But he was on the other side of a
he won a Pro Tour with a burn deck.
What's the stupid?
No, Paulo is a legit.
Yeah. So Paulo's sat down across from a Hazaret, which he astutely pointed out couldn't attack.
Yeah. Paulo, he also had a burn deck in that tournament, right? So I think Paulo is an okay choice here.
Number 3, Thomas, quote unquote, Tom Ross, known as the boss. Tom Ross has made a name for himself with his aggressive strategies.
Yes, he's a Naya guy and a poison guy. I don't think he's ever actually cast a lightning bolt.
And then
he's cast a giant growth of various.
Coming in at number 4, Li Shiqian.
Li Shiqian, he's like a swarmy red deck guy. You know, he's a fervent champion guy.
Yeah, I agree. Well, MTG GPT up until 2021. Well, yeah, I mean, let's pass it to you, Mike. Top 5, top 3. Let's give you top 3. Top 3 greatest burn pilots of all time.
So, I mean, are we talking success factors or are we talking like strategy?
Just all time. You can qualify all your responses.
Seth Manfield, John Finkel, Patrick Sullivan, Seth Manfield. Oh, Dave Price, number 1. Sorry. Dave Price. Dave Price, John Finkel, Seth Manfield, Patrick Sullivan, and me.
Let's go. Heard it here first.
I mean, I'm just better. Like, I just don't know what to tell you, right? Like, I haven't played it at the Pro Tour level that much.
I'm telling you, it's
you know who's better than me? There was a Pro Tour that I played in that I was in a 19-person scrum for 9th. But it was playing a red deck, but there were like 5 red decks in that top 8. So all those guys are probably better than I am. I missed an Eidolon trigger on day 1, which cost me top 8.
True.
You know, Swedish Kibler is probably number 1 because he won that Pro Tour. I wrote an article about how badly people in the top 8 were playing their burn decks because a bunch of them just missed on tables and let their opponents win from situations that if you were actually a good burn player, you wouldn't. No offense to the players who actually made top 8. I missed an Eidolon trigger on day 1, but substantially better than they are strategically. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I mean, famously, I beat Sam in the middle of day 2 in a feature match. When we were playing the 75 card mirror because Sam had made my burn deck. I mean, I don't know. I think I'm very good. Just no bones. I was thinking about this, like, where would I rank myself? I think active players, I'd rank myself certainly top 5.
I mean, I think I honestly would be willing to believe you just in the absence of proper competition because nobody's playing the deck right now that has any idea what they're doing.
The problem is they're so actively bad. Like it's just not.
No. I'm going to stop you right there.
No, even pro level
step
players.
up. This is a call to action.
Yeah.
Somebody step up, hop into my Menchies and tell me who the best modern burn pilot on earth is right now. We'll invite him on the next Spike Colony. We're a modern podcast now because I'm interested. I'm so interested in this because it just blows my mind because it's so let's give some background here. 1, as you have heard by now, Michael J has extreme disdain for incompetent burn pilots, which encompasses all of them, apparently, besmirching the good name of the One True Strategy. So I'm like, okay, there's a few people out there who know how to play burn. Like Sandy Dog MTG is just solo burn.
Sandy Dog is good.
Solo burn.
He's very good. Yeah, he's probably better than me.
Yeah. So solo burn.
Sandy Dog takes 5.
Okay.
Out of the top 5.
So Sandy Dog is nuts. But one thing is Sandy Dog has been mostly focused on not the modern format, to my knowledge.
Actually, I just want to pause you on Sandy Dog. One of the things that was annoying to me was I won a PPTQ in 17, I think, 2017. And I basically laid out what eventually became the modern bird deck, right? When I won this PPTQ, right? So all of the modern bird decks that have been played since, which start with Roman, because Roman won
regionals.
Like the regionals with like Inspiring Vantage, just all these Michael J.
cards. It spawned the Ancestral Recall podcast.
But Roman was just aping me, right? Like he had won a PPTQ after I won the PPTQ. And then like, basically the thing I laugh about is like all these people who are arguing with me off of their Discord or whatever are just playing my burn deck from 2017. Right. So, but
this
like,
is why you don't use Discord. You just got, you just got burned.
You have not. So, you know, people like talk about like people like sliding into your DMs. You have not gotten somebody to slide into your DMs until somebody slides into your DMs and says, my brother says that Chain to the Rocks is dope in modern burn. That is a very specific slide into a DMs, but we'll put that aside for a second. The thing that's annoying to me is Sandy Dog won a Grand Prix the next month, but he still had Wild Cattle in his deck. Right. And so like, I just figured out all these things were just bad. And then he won a Grand Prix with it.
Yeah. But this is just because, if you have a problem, it's that you don't play online. Like you crave all of the stuff that comes with, having people see your deck list published online, but you like don't play online and you don't grind. Like you're kind of like languishing in the shadows right now because you want to be in it, but you don't have time. Like I have the same problem, right? Like BK was just like
play online tournaments. Come on, man.
That's what I'm saying.
I don't have time for that.
No, you have to just like go full on clout farm. Like if you want to relive your influencer days, you have to go and play modern, play in RCQs, win some RCQs,
I think
win some RCs.
The thing that was annoying to me about it was like the top decks in modern at the time were like these, like Reed Duke was like really good, right? And like Reed Duke was just all these Abrupt Decay, Tarmogoyf, this kind of stuff, right? And if you're gonna be an idiot playing, fetch land into, shock land into Wild Cattle, right? Then two things happen to you. A, your opponent's removal becomes good, right? So stuff like Abrupt Decay suddenly starts getting context. And then B, you're bad against me, right? So we're playing heads up and you're like, oh, we're playing a Quasi-Mirror. I'm like, no, you have 4 Wild Cattles that are going to cost you 5 life and then I'm going to Searing Blaze it. That's what's going to happen. Like that is the entire paradigm of this match.
Yeah, but you have to carry people onto that conclusion. Like one of the big things is that you can talk about Skullcrack being bad all you want, but until you like start putting up all the numbers with Skullcrack free burn,
I'm just going to win this Saturday, and then people are going to be like, that was luck. Yeah, I probably got lucky to win.
You gotta win Saturday, and then you gotta keep winning after that. You gotta put modern burn back on the map. But it's the same thing with pre-modern. This is like the funny thing, Mike. But it's like you're like sure that people are gonna pay attention to what you're doing in pre-modern. But the problem is like unless you're playing all the time, and even if you are playing all the time,
when there were 2 meetups a month, I was posting the decks that I was winning with.
I know.
I missed one meetup, and then I don't count as a pre.
Yeah, you're not on the map. You're not.
I missed like one meetup.
Well, it's just like it's just like so much. Like one, like just consider Fran, right? Like we know that Fran plays a lot, works really hard on his decks, and then goes really hard. Like even he can't get through to people. Like I can't get through to people. I have sons of the problem is like you gotta make a choice. You either have to yell until you finally get through to people, or just give up.
Nobody likes that.
Yeah, give up the dream.
All right, so I had this enormously great weekend
back in, I don't know if it was May or June, whatever the weekend of LobsterCon was. And people ask me, like, what are the seminal times in your life? Oh God, whatever. I have had a great career and I have kids and, you know, I've done a lot of interesting things. But I mean, just recently in my life, I just had a cultivation of adult male friendships that was just unreal for me. And it was such a good weekend for me. And part of me is just like, I want to have more of that, full stop. Right. And that I don't know if that involves hanging out with a particular group of friends or playing pre-modern in the specific, but that was really important to me. Right. And that was like, that's the thing that I want to do with my life. Right. Just to have weekends like that.
Yeah.
As much as I can. Now I have this other thing, which is like, I am super disenchanted with contemporary Magic. And it's not because I'm not good enough. Right. So like, I'm definitely still good enough. But like, from a gameplay standpoint, it is not rewarding to get snowballed on turn 2 and 3 because I made the mistake of going second, right? That is not a very high skill way to win or lose the game. But I still am like tied to this idea of wanting to be able to compete at like the national and international level, which is why I'm going to try to win an RCQ this weekend. And this is like, I'm super torn because part of me is just like, I just don't get anything out of winning.
You win this tournament and then you get to play in another tournament, which you have to play a miserable format where you just like can't play burn and you get owned. Like,
yeah, I mean, like,
you can win a modern RCQ with burn, and then I don't know, the next RC is just going to be standard or whatever.
No,
and it's like,
well, I mean, like if it's Pioneer, it's just like the thing that is like the best example that you can give is COVID vaccination status. So people are just like, okay, all of these factors matter, right? Like, did I have sunlight? Am I obese? Did I work out? Right? Like, yes, all of those factors matter. We should strive to do all of these things and not die of COVID. By the way, 100% of people who died of COVID were unvaccinated, right? Like, this is a binary. All the rest of those things are just narrative around whether or not some unvaccinated person died or not, right? But if they were vaccinated, they literally just didn't die, right? So, I think it's the same where you just go and you're just like, okay, here's all these things. And some of these things are like, oh, I get something out of this. I get something out of this. I get something out of this. But at the end of the day, I'm slamming myself against a brick wall, but I'm still torn. Because I guess maybe I'm old and I want to still feel relevant versus like playing pre-modern. I just want to have fun with my friends.
The fire, man. It's like it's the fire. It's like winning feels good. It's just like another challenge. And, like it's great because the Humans of Magic interview with Sam shares like his fundamental goal in life, devoid of everything else, is to play as much paper Magic as possible. And this is not win as much paper Magic as possible. This is not like, it's just play. And he was just like, well, now I'm in a place in my life where every night people come over and play Commander games. And I'm happy. And what people don't know is that when I was pro or like, you know, on the train or whatever, like I didn't have my results my results didn't affect me. Like I was just happy to be playing paper Magic. And obviously he's going to try his best. He's like a goal oriented, you know, he's the kind of person that's like out there, you know, putting the grind on and like working really hard, but he does it in his own way. And he does it in a way that maximizes his enjoyment of the game. And he, you know, obviously like, you know, we're humans. And if somebody like comes up to me and is like, oh, you know, your article is super good. Your deck list is super cool. That's cool. Like, you know, you appreciate that, but that's not the goal, right? The goal is to play the games and to have fun playing them.
So I had this really weird situation happen to me last week, and it happened to me again yesterday. It's the Cavs lost, and I was super annoyed by how they lost. But I've had this, and this is like a new thing for me. It's completely new. So I go and I play in this pre-modern tournament on Saturday, right? And I have the best possible result. I was actually like, I mean, winning the tournament is better than top 4, but chopping in the top 4 is basically winning from the perspective I was in. And Fran was even just like, with the number of burn play, and I would have had to play against Shane in the top.
Yeah, you would have to double down against burn.
Yeah,
you have to beat burn and then beat burn again.
So like So like the draw, I couldn't believe they agreed to the split is honestly what happened. Right?
Everybody catch up on Michael J's latest article on Cool Stuff Inc. if you want to hear coverage of this tournament, because we didn't cover it at all.
So I get there and I get basically the maximum result. Right. So I made new friends. I got to hang out with Sonny, Kaplan made top 8, Cam made top 8. It was it was a great ultimate result. I complained like a child all morning and still ended up with the maximum result because of plot armor. Right. So then I just go do this. I come home, make myself a steak, and then it's the rest of the day is there and I'm just sad and lonely.
Yeah, because you're not playing pre-modern.
I'm just like, why am I not playing pre-modern? And I was just like, this is so weird. Like I'm always busy, right? Like always somebody wants to hang out with me, like every single day, every night. Like I just always do something fun, right? And I just like literally spent the whole day playing pre-modern. I got the maximum result. And I was just like,
I could really use some pre-modern now.
I'm sad and lonely now, right?
Yeah.
And it was really weird, So, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah, it was the LobsterCon Blues too. No, it's the same thing with me. I mean, like I would love to play a 32 person paper pre-modern tournament every night of the week if I could, and I'm sure 31 other people in this country would, right?
What's
like
super
we could
weird?
start our own. We could all move to Madison and just make this happen. But
like at Sacred Torch, right? I was willing to quit. I was just like, I'm done.
Yeah. Well, you need your almonds. You need some chicken.
So
too.
then all I did was eat fried chicken. I'm like, I could just talk about Magic all night, and I did.
Yep.
But then I was with you and Lan and Cam came over. I was just like having a great time, even though unlike really you good. And Cam, I didn't make top 8. But like it was just really weird to me that like I had played in this. I was just like, what are the goals that I've set out for myself? I did all the goals. I played pre-modern. I played Fran's deck. I made top 4. I chopped. Now I'm sad. Like that was weird.
Well, it's like it's kind of addicting. Like you just like want to be in that moment. Like, you probably look at that tournament like, man, I wish 32 people showed up and I could play
well, now
2 more rounds.
Been top 4 if 32 people.
Yeah, you wouldn't have.
There wasn't enough plot armor for that.
Yeah, you can't.
I had enough plot armor for 16.
Yeah, can't start 0-2 into 3-2 with 32 people.
And 0-2. You know what? We can go back to this because we didn't talk about that tournament or Oathpauloosh at all. I don't like Oathpauloosh. I love the fact that Oathpauloosh exists. I think it is a triumph of deck design. I love the fact that it exists, and I want Fran to do well. Fran made fun of me at the end of his last video, right? And it's not that I don't think Oathpauloosh can't win. Like when he says something like, "Oh, Mike thinks it's not a good deck," right? Like it can win. It can obviously win. He just won with it. It's just not the deck for me, man. Right? Like,
yeah,
you can see too many things without any control, right? And like, what happens if your opponent just has a Gaia's Blessing and a Swords to Plowshares?
That's the neat thing. They don't like
you can't ever win.
Like the only player who's doing that right now is Dr. Richard Shea.
I mean, Lan's deck has those cards. Your secret deck has those cards.
Yeah, but Lan's not playing. You're not playing Lan's deck, and my secret deck is still a secret.
It's a secret.
Yeah,
not for long, man. There's going to be you know what you could do. You could trick me into playing
secret deck,
Fran's black-white deck.
Oh yeah, nice. And then I can beat you with my secret deck.
So Fran's black-white deck, I would not play Death Grasp. I mean, that card doesn't seem good to me. Is it good?
I think. Do you think that I know? Do you think that I know if Death Grasp is good? Okay.
Between Death Grasp and Haunting Echoes, is Death Grasp better than Haunting Echoes? Can't you just Haunting Echoes?
I don't know. Good? I agree that Haunting Echoes is good, but also Gaining Life is awesome. Like, so, whatever.
How about play a 4th Gerard's? I'd play a 4th Gerard's Verdict.
There's Skeletal Scrying in that deck. I don't know. Gerard's Verdict is just poo-poo.
Why is it poo-poo?
How many Mind Rots have ever been played in...
It's not a Mind Rot. It costs 2, not 3, and you gain life.
Sometimes. I mean, the gain life is like a look, Gerard's Verdict is not a card that's good against decks that I play. Okay. So I can't tell you about Gerard's Verdict. It's like Withered Wretch.
Gerard's Verdict is fantastic against mono red.
I mean, I know that.
That is the absolute tits.
Well, okay. So the caveat here is I don't play a ton of burn in pre-modern. I kind of like Dustin. I like enjoy playing it, but I just like don't play it that often because it loses to cards like Gerard's Verdict, which I'm not interested in losing to. So
I mean, so what about my other lock piece? What about Sphere of Law? People don't play Sphere of Law. I think that card is sweet.
Yeah, it's the 4-mana one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that card.
I mean, the only card that you can be damaged by is Pile Driver at that point.
Yep.
So if you just kill the Pile Drivers, they basically lose.
Yeah, I mean, I love that card. Like, that card's super sick. I was going to play it and replenish.
Yeah, it's like the circle that you pay for once.
Yeah.
Like, what if you had that and a circle in play at the same time? Do you think you could cover the Pile Drivers?
I mean, I'm down with Sphere of Law, and then you just like Deathgrass to make sure that you're out of range. Because maybe it doesn't come down on turn 4. You might be at like, 5 and your opponent hits you down to like 3. And then you got a Deathgrass for 3 and then you're good.
Yeah, I think I'd play that deck. The thing, I would have played that deck at Bearded Dragon, but I just thought that Adam Sistis would show up and blow up all
blow up all your lands. I mean, somebody's going to blow up all your lands.
First round.
Yeah, no matter what, somebody's going to blow up all your lands. Like, it's crazy to me. Like, this is actually, oh my God, this is 3-hour podcast. Okay, 2.5 hours in, we finally got to Oathpauloosh. I was on record in our Discord. I was like, I hate this deck because of how annoying it is to consider playing against. Because
it's so passive.
If you're, I mean, I know that you've had it in your hands and you don't like it, but what I don't like is thinking about designing a deck to beat Oath of Druids, Wasteland Port, Treetop Village, and Cataclysm. Like, it's very hard for me to conceive of a deck that defeats all those things.
What if you just played a blue-green Oath deck?
Well, don't talk about my secret deck.
No, I mean, I'm just talking about the deck that I played when I first started playing pre-modern.
I mean, I don't like
blue-green Oath deck blowout Oathpauloosh.
I don't like that deck. I mean, I think the deck is like,
okay, you don't like it, and could it ever lose to Oathpauloosh?
I don't know.
Are they
like
going to be Infinite Spike Weaver?
It's like kind of a moot point because that like
even I don't play it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody like you don't play it, and like I think the deck has the deck's mana is not that good, and it's like horrifically slow, and like whatever. Like it's fun. That deck got Sam Black into pre-modern because he posted a deck pick with multiple guys blessings in it, and he was like, "Well, I'm interested."
And now he's in.
But aside from that, I think my Guy's Blessing deck is super cool. My deck does contain Guy's Blessing and Swords of Plowshares and has a plan for Cataclysm. But that's the thing is it took me...
His plan is counterspell.
It took me... Well, that's one of them. But it took me... Like, the problem was like... okay, this is my problem. Grotog never lost to Terrageddon. But... Grotog does not like Oath of Druids, and I'm pissed that my Meddling Mage has to name another card against Windswept Heath.
Yeah, man, it's great that the world changes. That's the only thing that keeps pre-modern from being boring.
So anyways, like
wouldn't you hate it if it was just Elves, Goblins, Landstill, and Burn, and those are the 4 card decks anybody can play?
I don't know. Eventually it will be. Eventually there'll be probably 5 decks that you can care to play, and then the other ones are just for if you want to have fun. I mean, that's actually kind of how it is right now, if we're being honest with ourselves. But at least Oathpauloosh could conceivably be one of those decks that's not very embarrassing. And my point is, you're right. The deck has one fundamental weakness, which is that it does not have a way to control its draws, but it also has a fundamental strength, which is that it has these cards, like if every single deck, it has a card for that deck like
makes their
like not like, oh, like this lines up well, right? It's like, oh, Swords of Plowshares lines up well against a lot of decks. Like so decks like I don't want to see this card ever. Like I don't want to get Oaths, I don't want to get Cataclysmed, I don't want to get Sphere of Resistance, and then for me with Replenish, I don't want to get Wastelanded. Like I added a bunch more lands to Replenish, so that's less of a problem. But
Replenish after sideboarding has to crush Oathpauloosh.
It's freaking close because one thing that Oathpauloosh has going for it is that it can Sylvan Library for 4 every single game against Replenish. So
can you? Do you think Franside's in Curse Totem against Replenish?
Yeah.
That's his actual core plan. I think
it's not the core plan. His core plan is Wasteland Port Cataclysm. So
do people know this plan? They actually understand what I mean when I say that he sides in Curse Totem.
Yeah. So for the listeners, the Replenish deck turns all of the Parallax enchantments. You can go to back episodes for the full details on the combo. But anyways, these Parallax enchantments are creatures with activated abilities. So they
become creatures with activated abilities.
So you no longer can do any of the Parallax tricks.
If Opalescence is in play.
Your opponent still has to deal with a bunch of 4/4s, which is
it also turns off Seal because Seal now has an active.
Right, because Seal is now a creature with an activated.
Hilarious.
So they can't even Seal cleansing the Curse Totem before, but it also turns your Oath of Druids into a creature, which they can Swords of Plowshares if they want. And if you don't have an Exalted Angel to hold back the 4/4s, you still have to play a game. Now, granted, Curse Totem is like an annoying card, but Fran's certainly going to have some, and he had him on video, honestly, like we can just like look at his VOD, but Replenish, I basically had as like, okay, like this is a like 80% matchup. And then I lost to Adam, and then I watched Fran narrowly lose to Replenish once and then defeat Replenish handily. And then all of a sudden I was just kind of like, okay, well, I guess Wasteland Port Cataclysm is like plan A against Replenish. And then you have backstops in the form of Ray of Revelation, Tormod's Crypt, and Curse Totem. So like if you don't get that Cataclysm off, like, you know, how many counterspells do you want to board in as Replenish? Like, remember, your blue mana is getting taxed by Wasteland Port.
So I think I understand why I don't like Oathpauloosh. Oathpauloosh has just like 1,000 half measures, right? It's just like, here's a half measure, here's a half measure, here's a half measure. If you add them all together, it's like 1.5 measures. And then you still need to get like, all right, well, between Ray of Revelation.
No. Those are backstops to if you miss on the Wasteland Port Cataclysm plan.
No, what I'm saying, but even like the Wasteland Port Cataclysm is a half measure, doesn't win the game.
Well, Cataclysm will win the game.
Not really. Like if you're Lanny and you're just like, yeah, I'm going to follow up with like Land Mox City of Traders, and I'm just going to combo you the next turn, which is super doable from like one turn out of a Cataclysm if there's no Sphere of Resistance in play. But it looked like a measure.
Well, those are interesting, but those are very important intervening ifs. So one, overcoming Wasteland,
but you have no way to control if your opponent does that or not.
No.
Like, I mean, all you do is just draw more lands.
Well, you're right, but I'm just saying, like, it's still an intervening if, because like one, like they have to get through the first thing. Like that's a very powerful thing, right? So Cataclysm is still hard for Replenish to deal with.
Yeah, but they have to.
Mox has to be involved, and
if Oath isn't in play, like they're not necessarily going to kill you.
Well, I mean, you're right, but you're only like you're right from this perspective of just kind of like you're bothered by the fact that Cataclysm does not deterministically win the game. And in fact, Ricky Thorson went on record on Will's podcast to say he's never lost to his Resolve Cataclysm. Like we've seen a lot of Cataclysms not win the game.
Yeah, not close out the game. So here's the thing.
But it's still
in
powerful.
Some decks, it could be really, really good. The problem is Oathpauloosh is just this green-white creature deck. It blows up a bunch of your opponent's land. It still has to connect 5 times, right? Like that in pre-modern. I mean,
but you've just watched him do it. You know.
Yeah, I think his opponents are soft.
I mean, I agree that on average, like, you know, his opponents are not as good as Michael J. But this is always true because Michael J is such a great player, and there's just not enough of you in pre-modern, which is why we go on Twitter and we ask anybody we can find to join the format. Doesn't matter who. Some of them
are really good.
Doesn't matter who. Some of them are great. Some of them are fine. Some of them are incendiary and make you really angry.
What if we had 3 Pro Tour champions at the next Bifrost event, which I think is going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a dream. So you know that's true, but you know this is the best caliber of competition that Fran can possibly put his deck through. So
I'm not saying that as a criticism of the players. What I'm saying is that it's very difficult for me to take seriously how good the strategies are.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
If the opponents are soft.
But that's what I'm saying is like I agree, right? Like I agree that that this deck can be learned. Like, similarly, Blue White Dreadnought was a deck that nobody could figure out how to beat, and then eventually people figured out how to beat. So I think Oathpauloosh is going to be.
People can beat Blue White Dreadnought. Kaplan never loses inside of the top 8, by the way.
Yeah, but he lost in the round of 8 twice in a row. So that does mean that people figured out how to beat him, because otherwise he'd be winning the tournament. Yes or no?
Right. He won the last meetup right before. Beat Rebel.
Yeah, but it's a meetup, Like, look at so one of the things that Blue White Dreadnought has not done, basically since its inception,
is to take a first place.
It hasn't taken first place. It didn't take first place in Madison.
Didn't take first place at LobsterCon.
Didn't take first place at LobsterCon. It took second. Didn't take first place. I mean, it wasn't even in the Euros top 8.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Spanish, Czech, everywhere. Always a bridesmaid.
That's why Mono Red is doing so well. Word, Mono Red, let's go.
All right. I'm glad we could give the listeners
a drop of
pre-modern in this modern podcast at the 2 hour and 40-minute mark, but we have got to wrap it up. It's been so nice catching up.
In 2 episodes.
No, I'm just gonna bomb it on people. It's fine.
Fuck it, we ball.
Yeah, fuck it, we ball. Let's try. Saturday afternoons. Let's try to get those records on. And then we'll see each other. Man, it's been a while since we've actually seen each other in person, but we'll figure that out soon.
Detail says that he's back from all of his whiskey adventures, and then we're gonna.
Yeah, it's time.
Because like Tom Martell's in town, he's like, "Yo, when can I get a pre-modern meetup, and can you provide a deck?" And the answer is as soon as we have a pre-modern meetup, and yes.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if we had Tom Martell's V and OSIP at the next Bifrost? 3 Pro Tour champions. Let's go.
Yeah, it'd be sick AF. Thanks to everyone for staying with us this long and through this many detours through the modern format.
Wait, so you want to fix my sideboard? I was going to play 2 Core Firewalkers and 4 Sanctifier on Vex, but based on this conversation, I think I'm going to cut all the Sanctifier on Vex because I hate them.
Okay,
and play
love Spike Colony. We'll talk about this off air.
And the core Firewalker's gas.
All right. Love Mike.
Love Mike.
Game over.